Welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality.
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I've got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor.
Here we go.
We're going.
We've been so excited about this show today that we've had to keep, all week we've been save it for the show. Save it for the show.
Oh boy.
Save it for the show. And then this morning, we kept getting in these little fights because we were both so excited about talking about such a juicy topic, but we couldn't talk about it until the show started.
Yeah, every time
so
I want to tell
the
us
energy was
something.
really high.
So if you're not familiar with the show, often what we're doing here is discovering things live on air. We do a lot of media analysis. The show is called Post-Orthodoxy. Sometimes we talk about things that are outside generalized consensus default worldviews. If you are subscribed heavily to those views, you may find some of this stuff offensive, as it might conflict with your reality tunnel. So if you're down to do some media analysis and explore some ideas, welcome to Post-Orthodoxy. What is the theme that we're exploring today? You haven't introduced the theme.
It's freedom of expression, which is why me and our co-host over here are wearing such delicious outfits. We're freely expressing.
I didn't have any delicious outfits to wear. I didn't know this was happening till the very end.
He had time to get our co-host dressed,
but not me.
But not have time to pick out something, and he can't wear his top hat over his headphones, unfortunately.
Yeah, it makes it a little awkward.
So, freedom of expression, the free speech has long been hailed, and by long I mean the last 300 years, as an inalienable human right by most of the West. I've been doing some very surface research into the history of freedom of speech in say ancient China or the Code of Hammurabi or shit like that.
Right.
And there does seem to be supportive evidence that the more organized a society was, the more people understood there had to be structures in place to protect the citizens' rights to express. Generally against for instance, in ancient China, the Song Dynasty founder Emperor Taizu vowed to never kill his ministers or censors, therefore allowing them actual freedom of speech and expression.
Very good.
Plenty of political overlords.
How long ago was that?
When was the Song Dynasty? Plenty of political overlords. That was 960. So
the concept's
that was over 1,000 years ago.
It's not just an American thing.
No. One could argue, if one valued the concept of freedom of expression as an inalienable human right, that it has been around wherever good people can be found throughout history.
That's right.
Whatever you think of the word good meaning. Now, I've been really enjoying using the term freedom of expression rather than just free speech, because free speech has become a trigger word for many people.
Fascinating.
Too much, to the point so much that people have started making fun of it by typing the phrase freeze peach, as in the snack that you eat in the summertime, a peach.
Yes, free speech.
They type freeze. They're like, oh, well, freeze peach proponents. And so it's become...
They're mocking the idea
of free speech, and also... avoiding the algorithm, avoiding being found by people who are on the internet trying to find people dissing free speech. And then so they search for free speech and then go jump on those posts.
Right.
That could be something that's going on. But anytime people feel like they need to mock an idea, that's a pretty powerful idea.
Yeah. Anybody out there right now, if you think that free speech is under attack, let us know.
And if you think that freedom of expression is dangerous, let us know that too. So anyway, I've been enjoying replacing the phrase free speech with freedom of expression in my mind over this week while I've been thinking about this show, because
that bleeds into a lot of different categories.
It bleeds into a lot of categories. Freedom of expression is a lot harder, I think, cognitively for people to say we shouldn't have.
Oh, you think it's easier for people to say we should limit speech than we should expression?
Yes, I do, because expression has become a term that has become so dear to many minority group movements over the last 50 years. Your personal expression, your right to expression, your self-expression. For instance, should men be allowed to wear pencil skirts to work instead of a business suit?
Should they have that freedom of expression?
Should men have that freedom of expression? And I would hazard a guess that if I were to draw a little Venn diagram of like people that have come to think free speech is dangerous, almost entirely are also people who think that men should be allowed to wear pencil skirts to work instead of business suits.
Okay.
Demographically speaking.
If you have different ideas, let us know.
Yeah. If you think that my overlap, I would say those two spheres are almost completely overlapped. I have a really awesome course to take us down of Venn diagrams. I made some charts.
Okay, good.
It's really fun. I'm very excited.
Are we jumping into that right now?
We don't have to jump into it right now.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you could do a little disclaimer for us. And we have 7 people watching right now. And
nice.
We really appreciate you guys on the various platforms. Take a minute and share this video. Share it. Invite people. Share it. We want to have a conversation.
I don't know. I don't know if they should share it. This show isn't for everybody.
No, I want it to be juicy.
This show isn't for everybody. We're happy to have people who don't agree with us watching the show. We actually like to have a mix of perspectives. That's kind of the point of the show. So that people who might know more about something than we do can illuminate us on a case rather than just letting us linger in our ignorance on a subject. So if you think that we're mistaken or wrong, or you can share another perspective that you would like to see us consider, that's why we have the show set up as we do, so you can comment.
This is going to be really exploratory and theoretical, and we are also going to address some specific recent events issues, but we're going to try and focus on the educational and theoretical for at least the first hour.
We have to break down some terms first.
So
anyway, disclaimer is I feel as a human being on the planet, that the pursuit of sovereign, the pursuit of a sovereign mind, and what they call in the Constitution, the pursuit of happiness, right? Or is that the Bill of Rights? Bill of Rights?
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Pursuit of happiness.
That comes from the
Declaration of Independence.
Literally the first document.
So the idea of a right to pursue happiness, liberty, all that business. To me, that what that means to me is that all the fruits of the human endeavor that we could ever imagine are available to us at our fingertips now. In terms of, if I want to know something about science, if I want to educate myself about some scientific idea or practice, then I can go look and find out about that scientific practice. I can pursue my own education by exploring the realm of science or politics or sexuality or economics. I can go explore these things. I don't have to have a PhD in these things to be able to gaze upon the gifts that have been given to the human endeavor through people finding out things and revealing them to us.
However, that right is its own category and separate from your right to then propagate what you may have absorbed into other people's experience.
All right, you're going to have to say more and less.
Okay. You absolutely have the right to educate yourself.
Right, okay.
Do you, however, have the right
to share my education?
Things?
To share my education?
Yes.
To share what I've learned and to have perhaps...
what you think you've learned.
No, I can have learned something and it might be wrong.
Yes.
So if I've learned something, then it's only by sharing it that I get to have these ideas critiqued and revised so that I can become even smarter. That's the idea of sharing ideas that you've learned, is so that you can see if you're in a consensus. You can see if other people agree and say, this is a useful thing in the world.
But what if you go teach yourself something, and then that something that you've taught yourself is wrong, and then you go share it, not knowing that you're sharing incorrect information.
It's happened before, yeah.
And the people that hear you sharing it also don't know that what you're sharing is wrong. Now you've just spread incorrect information, and this is where it starts getting really hard to talk like some of my leftist friends without saying, you shouldn't be able to say things because people are too dumb to know when you're wrong.
So for those of you that know this show and are familiar with our history and how we got into a home studio, that was lobbied against us to get us censored from the radio station.
That's what KBMF said.
The early rumblings were, we don't agree that you should say the things that you're saying, not because they're wrong, but people who are dumber than me and you
might misinterpret
what we're saying
and do something stupid
and endanger people. So
now we're getting into like rights and responsibilities, which is a whole category we're going to get into later in the show. What is a right and what are you truly responsible, and what's the difference between intentions and the results of the intentions?
So us sharing our education in topics of the day resulted in them saying, you can't share that, not because it's incorrect, but because dumb people might misinterpret what you've learned. So rather than say maybe...
But they didn't say dumb people. They just said other people.
Other people. Of course, I get what you're saying, but those other people may not get it. So we must remove you from the airwaves.
Yes. What do you agree?
Do you think that's a good idea?
Yes.
So
Mark French, tuning in on YouTube, thank you, sir, he says, I think freedom of expression could definitely be co-opted by Congress and media and tech firms to continue to attack the actual foundation and language of the First Amendment. Absolutely. There's so many things like...
It's a hall of mirrors at that point.
It is. Like, what's that phrase that everyone was throwing around over the last 2 years? Science changes. Science changes.
But believe in it.
Everybody was saying science changes, and they all meant that you should do something different about it. Like some people said science changes, so it's okay that everyone used to say masks are dumb for the populace, but now all the populace should wear masks.
And then dumb again. That's fine because the science that was the phrase to justify that.
And then other people were saying science changes on the flip side about other issues that were going on.
Right.
Anyway.
Which means that we can't stick with the dogma as is being preached because new information has come in that makes that information dangerous.
The dogma was millions of people are going to die, and then new data came in that said we know exactly who's susceptible to dying from this, and we could be protecting them with these preventative measures.
With these things, yes.
Science changes. They said in March, there's nothing we can do. By May, we knew what we could have done.
We knew who was at risk, and we knew what we could have done to keep people from going into the hospital. Early treatents. We knew what they were.
We're going to save that for the next hour.
Well, I think it's important on this generalized thing. So, some have asserted that because information about current science was suppressed, that's not a conspiracy theory. There's a whole record of it. Because that was suppressed, these perspectives were suppressed, people were banned from platforms for expressing that there were early treatments that could save lives, resulted in lots of lives ending. So that seems like a topic worth discussing. If some kind of policy resulted in, some have estimated, 80% of the COVID deaths in America could have been prevented with early treatments.
Shit.
80% of the people who died from COVID. Now that is, somebody said that. I can go find that stuff and I can connect it. If you want to know my source, I will find it for you. There are several sources. Some of them have been banned from the internet, so you cannot find them directly. You have to find them indirectly.
And it's
hence the point of the show.
It's an inductive reasoning case anyway, and we're getting off topic. It's an inductive reasoning issue anyway, because you have to go into who do we know is most susceptible and who do we know responds best to these early treatments when properly applied.
Right.
And then you have to go through all the people that died and say how many people that have died are in the category of people that would have responded to these early treatments when properly applied if they had had access to them.
Uh-huh.
So it would be a
Sure.
lot of work to do something like that.
It would be a lot of work to do. It seems like a relevant thing considering it's a matter of life and death of a lot of people.
Absolutely.
It seems like we should be able to explore that rather than having those questions removed from the dialogue.
All right.
Show us the pie chart.
I'm going to go into my Venn diagrams. I'm so
Okay.
excited. Okay. Venn diagrams. So it'll pop up on your screen in about 5 seconds. So a Venn diagram. I grew up. I talk a lot about my upbringing. I grew up super conservative, evangelical, homeschooled Christian, which meant my mom was educating me. I just go back and do my little bit. My mom was educating us, and she did a really bang up job. Bang up. Bang up is good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so she did a really good job.
Except for
all of the
modern
stuff that we
colloquialisms.
all the stuff that we learned was within the perspective of this evangelical Christian perspective. But what we did learn, we were very well educated, and we had an excellent at least I did. I don't think the younger kids did as much of this, but I did critical thinking puzzles. I took logic classes. We did logical fallacy tests, like people do math problem tests. When in the beginning of the Chronicles of Narnia, the children are making fun of Lucy for claiming that she went through a cupboard into another realm. And the children are very concerned about Lucy for this stupid and egregious lie that she won't let go of. And so they go to the professor of the house they're staying at, and they're like, "Professor, we think she might be sick. We don't understand. She's never lied before." And he says, why don't they teach logic in schools anymore? You know, he's like, "Oh, don't they, like, what do they teach in schools these days? It's logic, children." He basically goes full on Sherlock Holmes at them. And he's like, when you've evaluated all of the options, whatever remains almost must be true. Lucy has never lied before. None of you knows for sure that closet does not go to a secret realm.
As absurd as it may sound.
Yep. You should just check. You know, they hadn't checked because they were just obviously she was lying.
Of course not.
So anyway,
that's a great allegory.
Yeah, we don't even need to look at that because it's so false.
Yeah, exactly.
So a Venn diagram is a visual aid to cultivate critical thinking. Okay, this is a free product called miro.com. It's sort of like the olden days of Prezi, if any of you remember Prezi. Here's a good Venn diagram. Dogs in one circle, overlapping with mammals in another circle, overlapping with things born with legs in the third circle. All three circles are overlapping. Some dogs are mammals. No, sorry. I looked over this several times and I was like, I did it right. Anyway, just pretend that all dogs are mammals.
We're listening. We're going to roll with it.
Let's change this. Let's change it. We'll change it to, I don't think I can unlock it right now.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Unlock. Okay. All right, we'll change it to has hair. There we go. That's accurate. That's scientific now. Some dogs have hair. Some dogs are born with legs. Some things born with legs have hair. Some things that have hair are dogs.
Yes.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Very good.
Unfortunately, some dogs are born without their legs, mutations and disease and stuff like that.
Okay.
So this is a rough, trashy Venn diagram I threw together.
Great.
Here's another Venn diagram. Spiritual practices. One circle we have spiritual practices. In one circle we have the concept of an afterlife. And in one circle we have the concept of a savior. Some spiritual practices have the concept of an afterlife. And some spiritual practices, if you look here in the middle, in the very middle of the three circles overlapping, some spiritual practices have the concept of an afterlife and a savior. Some things that talk about a savior are a spiritual practice, and some things that talk about a savior are a football team. And that's not in this Venn diagram.
Ooh.
Okay. So this is another popularized visual representation of a Venn diagram. For those of you that might be listening to the podcast later, you can Google the meme Epic Handshake.
Okay.
Epic Handshake is used all the time.
So that's the Venn diagram.
This is a Venn diagram
right.
as a meme. It's a memeified Venn diagram. It's a black man and a white man, very muscular, and they're doing like this awesome bro handshake, right? And on the black man's arm, it says dogs, and on the white man's arm, it says single people, and the handshake is not getting chocolate on Valentine's Day. That is also a Venn diagram.
That's a Venn diagram.
And then people took this Venn diagram and modulated it. So here's a black man's arm and an extremely muscular Simpson arm. And it's the black man's arm says the hood, and the Simpson arm says Marge Simpson. And the epic handshake that they're Venn diagramming over is saying homie. Because Marge Simpson says homie all the time. And it's weird and ironic. Okay, now.
All right.
Here is another iteration of a Venn diagram that has been memeified into the epic handshake meme.
Okay.
So we're setting the stage for critical thinking about this issue that we're going to talk about because most people come at this issue emotionally.
Oi.
I have rights.
Oh.
Or you want to kill people.
Right.
Like that's
right.
kind of all
right.
we're at. If
right.
you care about freedom of speech, you want to kill people. If you don't care about freedom of speech, you don't care about like all the work our forefathers did and shit like that. So it's just going to extremes.
The World Economic Forum is going to come and eat you.
Obviously, those loud vocal extremes on either side are not representative of what every human thinks about freedom of expression or inalienable human rights in general. So on the epic handshake, on this example, we have on the black man's arm people who wear masks, and on the white man's arm people who refuse to wear masks. And the epic handshake is hating on people who wear masks incorrectly. And I love it. I love it. Because if you're a person that, like, either way, there's this cloud of folks in the middle that just sort of waft through life with a mask hanging under their nose. And it's like, why are you doing that? You know, if you're a person that doesn't think that the mask was meaningful, then you're just looking at them as worse than someone that wears a mask hanging under their nose all the time is worse than someone that wears a mask properly all the time. Most people that think that the masks didn't help us at least acknowledge that if someone's wearing a full-on mask, they're obviously very afraid and they have a very good reason to be protecting themselves. And I can respect that.
You want to make another Venn diagram about that?
If you want to wear a full-on mask correctly, shit, it's going to help you with smoke, it's going to help you with allergens, it's going to help you with cat fur.
I don't know.
Like, whatever they're useful for, it does something.
Sure.
You know? But,
properly used.
But
yes.
Everybody on either side hates on people who wear masks incorrectly. And I thought that was pretty funny.
That should be a part of somebody's political platform. I think these little Venn diagrams is how you make your platform when you're running for office.
Make your platform actually accessible to people.
To people. Like, we all know that people who wear masks under their chin are dumb. So everybody can agree on that.
Do one or the other. Do one or the other. This is me coming from an extremely religious background. Like, fucking do your religion consistently. Do your religion consistently.
You know, maybe that was why that they might have had a valid reason for kicking us off the radio station, but they didn't know it. Because whenever we said masturbate 3 times fast, it could have caused sexual thought.
That's true.
When we talk about the masturbate. The debate around masks.
And you're not allowed to say anything that might cause sexual thought on the radio.
Right.
Which made for some really funny situations. All right, so this is also a Venn diagram.
Oh.
It's one circle that says dead in it and one circle that says alive in it. And those 2 circles are not touching at all.
Uh-huh.
Because you are either dead or alive.
That's the story.
And there are some stories of the near-death experiences.
Near-death,
and liminal spaces.
Maybe they bumped up and you could see through the window.
Well, but I think when this is going to lead into our second set of diagrams we need to talk about.
Parallel
the
universes?
Between the empirical use of a phrase and the colloquial use of a phrase.
Very good.
So scientifically, when your heart stops and you have no brain waves, you are dead. Okay. Now, your spirit, or whatever the fuck you may call it, can hang around for a while and be re-sucked into your body when someone applies appropriate CPR 30 minutes later at the hospital. It's happened.
We have a lot of first case scenarios where people said that.
But according to the hospital, you are either dead or alive.
On or off. Right.
Funny part, quote from Princess Bride. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Mostly dead is slightly alive. We all laughed at this because it's not true. Now we get to the crux. Here's another Venn diagram. Even though the bubbles aren't touching, it is still a scientific and logical Venn diagram. There is either free speech or not free speech?
Oh boy, you're making the case.
Scientifically.
Sure.
Scientifically.
Right.
If we're not talking about the legal version of free speech, we're not talking about the colloquial version of free speech, we're not talking about your particular version that you use amongst your homies.
We're not talking about TOS agreements on your platforms.
Service. No, we're talking about either you walking down the street are free to express yourself or you are not free to express yourself. Now, in Butte, Montana, I cannot walk down the street without a shirt on because I have female boobs.
Actually, I think you can in Montana.
Butte, Montana?
I think in Montana.
I think it's only like 2 states that allow women to free the nipple.
Well, New York City passed it a few years ago, not to go off subject, but I mean, in most cities you cannot.
Okay. I do not have free expression.
Right.
That's just one instance where I don't have free expression. You cannot.
If I wanted to do the show pantsless,
you could not.
There would be consequences if I did it.
Well, okay, don't get ahead of yourself because we're talking about you. We're not talking about the internet. We're going to get into the internet because that's a whole different subject. Our expression on the internet is a completely different community and subject than our expression in the physical realm.
Gotcha.
So you walking down the street in America do not actually have free expression.
Correct. There are limits on expression.
There are limits on your expression. Therefore, you have regulated speech or regulated expression.
That's true.
Now, I would be very curious if there are any countries on the planet where people truly have completely free expression.
There must have been at some point.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm sure. And now
this is where we're dealing with free. Is free the letter of the law, or is it consequences of actions within the community?
It
doesn't even have to be a law.
You're standing at the corner. You're standing at the street corner.
Yeah.
We're standing on Galena Street.
Yeah.
And you're looking down Galena Street.
Yeah.
And then you turn the corner onto Main Street, and then you're looking down Main Street, and you've only moved like a foot in physical time space.
Yes.
But you have a completely different perspective on reality.
Yes.
So legal free speech and regulating speech in advance is just around the corner from true free speech that has consequences.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So this is important to talk about because when people say that they are against free speech, they must understand that they are saying that they are for regulated self-expression. You don't get to have some free speech, just like you don't get to be slightly alive.
Right.
You are either free to express or not free to express. This is not talking about the consequences of your free expression.
Mm-hmm.
That's just around the corner.
Okay.
Just around the corner. So
very clear.
That's my Venn diagram right there. This leads us to our things that are different. Free speech versus regulated speech, or free expression versus regulated expression. And importantly, the concept of empirical use versus legal use versus colloquial use versus personal use of any concept. That's my setup.
Okay. Oops. I see you.
So
we're going to walk you through this for the audio folks who are going to be listening to the audio only later. So,
I did.
Yeah. Oh, you just did it. Yes.
I explained the bubbles and the circles and stuff like that. So I did a poll on my Facebook page that was like, do humans have a right to free speech, or do humans have a right to regulated speech? And I had 14 people say that humans have a right to free speech, and 2 people say that humans had a right to regulated speech, and then Boyce Brown got on and said humans have a right to yell fire in a crowded theater. And I specifically said, don't add any other options, and he added another option. God damn it, Boyce.
It sounds like that's why he's our friend.
He's going post-orthodox on my post-orthodoxy poll.
That's right. So
I want to go all the way to the seed of this concept to start. Inalienable rights. We started to have a conversation on the way back from the hot spring last night about whether animals have a right to eat. And I kind of scoff at that.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe I have a different understanding of what the word right means.
Okay.
So, and I've never had to codify what I thought right meant. But I generally don't think of animals as like having rights. I don't think of animals as having a right to eat. Maybe I think of like if you're a working animal, if you've come into relationship with a human in some way, I feel as though
there's a contract.
You have a right to be treated in a way that does not create suffering. You know, like if you're going to be an elephant in a circus, you have a right. A working animal has a right to be treated in a way that does not cause harm. A dog pulling a dog sled has a right to be treated in a way that does not cause harm. Clydesdales pulling plows on farms have a right to be a working member of that society in a way that does not cause them harm. You know, not poked with sticks that make them bleed.
Okay.
You know, those sorts of things. But when you're talking about like a deer or a bunny rabbit. If there's no contract in place, and I guess this is me still sort of orienting all of nature into relation with Homo sapiens, but if there's no contract in place between the Homo sapiens and I don't think of deer as having a right to food. Do you?
Again, what do you mean by right?
Exactly. It's important to talk about this because
the idea.
Do we have a right to speech? Do we have a right to free expression?
Well, like my take is like, yes, we, as humans, we have put borders over the entire planet. There's lines, imaginary lines everywhere.
Humans have added fake lines everywhere.
And then there's real lines, like highways and aqueducts and different lines. There's different lines that we have created that compartmentalizes nature. And I think at some point, some people realize that, well, if we are cutting off a range for this creature may no longer live. And so we've recognized the rights of that creature to live in order of creating those highway overpasses so that bobcats can go across without getting slaughtered.
We're forcing wild animals into contracts with humans by going into their natural territory.
We've done it all, yes.
Okay, so maybe I do imagine that a beastie has, by right of being born on this planet, I wish I could fix my microphone so I wasn't yelling all the time. By right of being born on this planet, a wild beastie has the right to its natural territory that would allow it to live.
I would like to see that. I don't know if that is an actual right, but I think we do have a sense that that's the way it should be. Most decent people have a sense, unless you're just some corporate raider who doesn't give a shit about that butterfly because that's a great place to go build your factory or whatever.
Right. Interesting. So when we talk about not the colloquial use of freedom of expression and not the legal use of freedom of expression, which varies from country to country, but the empirical right of beings to freedom of expression.
Okay, let's talk about that.
And now being the only beings with translatable codified language, we're going to talk about humans.
Okay.
We express. We express through our dress. We express through our voices. We express through our mannerisms.
We're symbolic creatures, so we use symbols to express.
Right.
Yeah.
A zebra doesn't care if it can wear a pencil skirt to work or not.
No, it's not a problem for them.
It's not thinking about its self-expression or its freedom to express.
No.
A zebra either does something that brings them food or doesn't bring them food, or a zebra does something that attracts the lion to where they are or does not attract the lion to where they are. Those are the things a zebra is thinking about. It's not thinking about its right to self-express.
Right.
Now, a zebra does not have artificial consequences for its way in nature. We as humans have a gamut of artificial consequences for our way in nature. If I walk down the street in a bikini in Florida, I will have little to no consequences. I can even go into an ice cream shop in Florida in a bikini.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. I cannot walk down the street in a bikini in Iran.
Right. You will be beaten up.
I will be beaten up by men who don't know me.
Right.
I can't go into an ice cream shop in New York City in a bikini. There are many places, no shoes, no shirt, no service.
Right. Okay. Sure.
So these are all artificial consequences.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with my ability to have food, have housing, or have life.
Call that social agreements.
Yeah.
Okay.
A zebra only has...
It doesn't have to be a law for it to be a social agreement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A zebra only has empirical consequences. What a zebra does in its day will bring it closer to food and survival or further from food and survival.
Mm-hmm.
I have a ton of decisions to make that will cause multitudes of things to happen to me that have nothing to do with food or survival or empirical natural causes. So
not directly, yeah.
If I go campaign on the courthouse steps in Butte for gay rights, a variety of consequences will ripple out from there. I might get invited to be on a radio show. I might get asked out to lunch by a troubled kid who doesn't have anybody to talk to about coming out. I might never get spoken to again by conservative parents in town who know me and who now don't trust me around their children because I was campaigning for gay rights, and they think that all gay people are pedophiles. Now, if I go campaign, those are all artificial consequences. Those are social agreements.
Social agreements,
and
yes.
we exist in a realm that has multitudinous different social agreements.
Different social structures that don't always have
The
Venn
same
diagrams
rules.
that over what's okay and what's not okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I grew up in a world where it is not okay to kiss a boy when you want to.
No.
And I hung out with a lot of people in college who did think it was okay to kiss somebody when you wanted to. Therefore, people tried to kiss me. And I thought they were bad.
Right.
Because they should know better.
They had good taste.
Because I had I was living in a different reality, a non-empirical reality built of social agreements.
So because they were outside of your known agreements, then that made them a threat.
Yeah. Whereas a zebra here and a zebra here live in the same reality. Two zebras aren't going to run into each other and be like, oh my God, Bob, why are you walking down this side of the river?
Right.
Like,
right.
They're just existing with empirical natural causes for their behavior. Okay. So humans can have empirical free expression, but we have a shit ton of unnatural consequences. Contrived consequences, social agreement consequences, non-empirical, non-natural world consequences, right? These are social consequences that only exist because we have brains that philosophize.
Social construct, these are the boundaries and rules of the construct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we all live in different constructs.
Yeah, it makes it tricky sometimes.
Don't worry, Valaric Shard. I was never kissed without my will until after I actually got divorced and left the church.
Yeah.
And then some lady named Janet at a party who was much older than me and very small, like climbed up me and kissed me because she was really drunk. And that was like the first time someone had forcibly kissed me. I was like 27. So I was really lucky.
Mine was a gay man at a party in Los Angeles when I was 21.
That was the first time you were forcibly kissed?
Well, I guess, yeah, it was the first time where I just thought I was going to shake somebody's hand and they gave me a big kiss on the lips.
Wow.
And it was one of those, like, all the alarms go off of, ding, like, ding, where am I and what's going on? Am I in danger? What's happening? Yes.
Thank you, Valaric Shard. Yeah, he asked, did they at least stop trying to kiss you when you asked them to stop? Chef Boyardee says, regulated speech is unacceptable. Post-Orthodoxy is proof that being quote-unquote canceled is a facade. You have built an uncancelable platform? ? I'm not sure if the question mark's supposed to be there. But yeah, we're not sure.
We haven't built the uncancelable platform yet. We'll get to that later in the show.
Pia from Honolulu is digging this. Thank you for tuning in, Pia. I'm walking in. I didn't graph this out ahead of time, but we're walking in from the empirical rights. What rights do we have just for existing? Many people on the left argue that a human being has a right to housing simply because they were born, and that therefore we shouldn't be arguing about whether or not we should be paying to house homeless people. That because you were born, you have a right to food, you have a right to shelter. Many people argue that you have a right to an education. And when you say that someone has a right, then who is responsible for enacting that right?
Or protecting that right?
Because these are socially contrived consequences and rights.
Yes, right.
Like zebras and lions are not thinking about their right to education or housing.
No.
So we're talking empirically, what are our rights? And in that category, as the Constitution of the U.S. said a couple hundred years ago, an inalienable right. As in, no one should be able to take this right.
Right.
No one,
Right.
literally,
Nobody's
no one can.
giving it to you.
That's what inalienable
Right.
means. It
Yeah.
cannot be taken away from you.
Right.
You cannot be alienated from your right to freedom of expression. That's what the Constitution of the U.S. said.
Right.
The
That
Declaration.
language is
The Declaration.
really important to
No one even gave
break
it to
it
you.
down
Yeah.
syllable by syllable and etymologically.
Yes. Slash on YouTube says, I think maybe you should clearly separate intellectual expression from modesty, nudity expressions. So we're speaking of verbal expressions versus physical expressions.
So it's a separation of mind, body, expression. It's a separation of mind and body.
So
that's interesting.
Two different pathways. That's a whole conversation.
Yeah, that's a conversation.
Then we can say, if we're talking about freedom of physical expression and freedom of verbal expression, whether it's on print or in a conversation, then we divide that up into two categories and we can discuss along those two pathways.
Sure.
For instance, do I have the right in my physical expression, my right to freedom of physical expression? Do I have the right to go and kiss somebody that I want to kiss?
Well, this is always that thing of like your rights end at somebody else's.
That's the phrase. Your right to swing your fist ends at my face.
Right.
Before my face.
Yeah.
I've always liked that quote. But
somebody swinging at your face and not hitting you is still a form of intimidation. Like, is it right there at the skin line, or where is the buffer?
Well, and also, and this is pretty radical, but we are like in the category of empirical rights. Like you were born with this. This is who you are. You were born with this right. Do you have the right to go punch somebody? Yes, I would say empirically in the natural order of the world, like early human society, like animalistically, a lion has a right to go and eat a zebra when it wants to eat a zebra.
Right.
We don't think of that in the same way as we think of if I have the right to go and punch somebody that's offended me.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like, whoa, I don't know if you have the right to punch someone.
Created constructs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but empirically, naturally, I'm going to say from my own personal ethical theory, empirically, in the natural order of Homo sapiens as organic beings on planet Earth, we have the right to full freedom of expression.
According to your theory, like just your general notion.
I'm setting that out as like my general, before legal rights.
That's your perspective. That's your perspective. You believe.
This is my current theorem that I'm starting with.
And you're open to have it changed. But
absolutely.
Got it.
But empirically, before legal rights, before we talk about consequences, before we talk about personal and social interactions, a zebra has a right. A lion has a right to eat a zebra, and I have a right to punch someone or kiss someone. Whatever the word right, this word we're dancing around the word right.
Which is okay. Yeah.
You know, like.
So right means correct. Does that mean correct? And correct according to the construct.
Here are some similar words.
Okay.
A moral or legal entitlement to have or obtain something. Or to act in a certain way. Entitlement, prerogative, privilege, advantage, birthright, authority, authorization, license, permission, dispensation, consent, franchise, sanction, exemption, immunity, indemnity, carte blanche.
All those words should round out the idea of what you mean by right.
Right. Is a zebra born with the right to territory sufficient to try to be alive in?
Because we have to provide that, because otherwise we could just chop it up and take away their right? So that's the idea, is we've been taking away the free expression and the birthrights of other creatures as we've moved into their territory. And so there has been some pushback where we reestablished
so anytime there
some rights, some birthright to the natural world.
Anytime there is some group or species or anything infringing upon another species' ability to try to live, do you have a right to be alive?
Well, that's one of my old, when I was like a young punk, 20-something years old, I'm like, that bunny rabbit just gets to go over there, wake up and go eat some grass, go home and go to bed. It's like, I would like to just wake up and go eat some grass and then hang out and chase each other and have rabbit sex and then go to bed. Like, that sounds like a pretty good life. So I feel like, I've lived in the world and I've also dealt with a lot of wonderful people and a lot of assholes. So the social constructs are not arbitrary for me. I've been abused by people within constructs, and I've been abused by people who have decided to leave the construct. So it's a lot to negotiate.
Yes.
But yes, I feel like, do we have a right? Like, I was born, this is the thing that I used to tell myself all the time. Like, I was just born here, right? I didn't buy a ticket to come and get pooped out on the planet.
I don't think you owe anybody anything because you exist.
So now I exist, and so that's where some people say, well, you just got to work. You just don't get a house. You just can't go run off and live in a cave. And
but
I'm like,
some people
but
do
kind of, I want to do that. Maybe I just want to go fold some sticks over and hang out there for a summer and do some writing.
Well, but also,
I don't have that right.
You didn't choose to be born in the part of the planet you were born in. Now, if
I didn't choose that, right.
If you had been born in Oklahoma, you could have easily self-expressed by not getting a house. But if you had been born in Butte, you would not have had the freedom to self-express by not getting a job to get a house. You have to have shelter in Montana. You did not choose to be born in a place where you are required to seek shelter. Now, in the natural world, in the organic animal kingdom, most animals are born, live, and die, born, live, and die, born, live, and die in an environment that they can naturally live in without needing to do anything artificial.
Right.
An animal that can handle lots of rain is born in a region that has lots of rain. An animal that can handle a ton of drought and heat is born in a region that has a ton of drought and heat. But humans don't get that choice. We've gone everywhere.
So this is where...
And we are no longer born in an environment that we can naturally live in without participating in social constructs.
Yes, and that's the thing that I thought maybe the social constructs are unfair when it gets impossible to live without having to trade your entire day for a little bit of sustenance.
This is where we get into John Trudeau's idea of the Industrial Revolution or the prison planet. That
you mean John Trudell?
Trudell, sorry.
Yeah, not Trudeau.
Trudell, yes.
John Trudell.
So Slash says you have the right to defend your rights or your position or your action with might. I think that's kind of interesting. Chef Boyardee says right is bad. Human needs should be the focus. So I don't owe anybody anything for having been born. A zebra does not owe anybody anything for having been born. When a zebra is born, it doesn't have a job. It just has functions. In order to continue being a zebra, in order to continue being alive, it must find water, find food, and stay away from the lion.
As my friend Jim Tripp said, it cost me $2,000 to be born. Where was I supposed to get that kind of money?
So I don't owe anybody anything for having been born, but was I born with... I was absolutely born with needs. Food, shelter, and love.
Right. Incidentally, yes.
But was I born deserving anything? Most conservative Christians are coming from the perspective that because Eve ate the apple and disobeyed God a long time ago, that humans are not born deserving anything good. And that anything good that does come into a human's life is because God is being benevolent and forgiving, but that most Christians believe that all humans are born not deserving anything. And they operate socially out of that belief. So that's not my personal belief. I think I was born... I don't think I owe anybody anything for having been born. And I do know that I was born with needs. But was I born deserving anything? Does anybody owe me anything because I was born? Does society owe me? This is where we're getting back.
This is why we have the Bill of Rights.
We're bringing it back to the freedom of rights, freedom of speech. Does do the group and the area I was born into without my choice, does that group and area owe me anything because I showed up?
So, well, if you're going to talk socially in this country,
which is easy because that's what we're all familiar with.
Life,
not dissing you.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
What do those three things mean? So, we just can't take your life without. We're not allowed to go take your life. So you're allowed to have life
Legally.
Yes.
In the U.S.
Right. We just can't come kill you
Yeah.
for no good reason.
The government does.
Liberty.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It's slightly different than freedom.
Yes.
Liberty can exist on a spectrum.
So maybe
freedom does
right.
not exist on a spectrum. You are either in prison or not in prison. But
Liberty is rough because it's like, again, like as an organic being, I like the idea of being able to go stack some logs and make a house
Yeah.
and fish and then play with rocks in the stream all day for fun. That seems like I would like the liberty to do that. I don't have that liberty without consequences that would endanger my life.
Yes.
Or my freedom.
Right.
So
because of where you live?
Well, there's no land that I know of where I can just go off and live on my own without it being owned.
Oh, right.
By the government, by a private.
Okay.
You know, I would have to hide to do it.
So this is again coming back to the idea that we are born onto a reservation.
Right, the industrial reservation, as John Trudell calls it.
You must play the game.
Yeah, the idea that Indians are just on the reservation and the rest of us are free is it's a matter of scale and degree. But no, we live on, as John Trudell said, an industrial reservation. There's no place where you can just be alive, pursue your liberty to find what would make you happy, pursue your happiness without endangering your life for freedom. These are my early frustrations as a young man. Like, I don't want to go to get a telemarketing job. I really don't want to do that.
You're born having to play the game.
Right. So that, I think, when we're talking about pursuit of happiness, now we have all these social constructs for good reason, because like in like the extreme libertarian hellscape, everybody could go off and build a cabin and do their thing. Then also they can shit in the stream if they want, and they can do whatever the fuck
Even
they
though
want.
People have
Right,
to drink
right.
out of that stream.
Right. Well, it's all going down water for me, so why should I give a fuck?
Right.
Right. So that's like the extreme freedom version, right? And so in between are these constructs that hopefully as society agrees upon that we can be alive. We can pursue our freedom of expression, our pursuit of happiness. We can pursue that and not be a burden on the environment or the people around us. This is like, yeah, we all agree that's probably a good idea. And I want those. I want those agreements.
Right. Right, because say a zebra is born and lives in a community.
Uh-huh.
It lives in a localized community where they all make decisions for each other's well-being. They go towards places that have water, and if the water runs out, they will keep looking for more water until everyone has had water.
I just keep seeing zebras in pencil skirts now. Every time you say zebra, I just see a zebra in pencil skirts. I shouldn't have had that last hit.
Woo! Sorry.
But anyway,
drink
so
water.
now I just see all the zebras in pencil skirts
But
go into the watering hole.
One group of zebras
Leopard print.
does not think about the well-being of another pod of zebras.
I don't know.
I'm sure there are animal societies that do overlap, and we have seen many stories in and out of captivity where one species is kind to another species.
Right, right.
Absolutely.
Interspecial love.
But it always has to do with what is in front of you in the animal kingdom. If you encounter suffering, the animal kingdom generally does something about it, cross species.
Mm-hmm.
But in the human kingdom, we are being asked to consider potential suffering that we are not experiencing or seeing. We're being told, if you let your cows shit in this creek, then my garden further, whatever, my children can't play in the creek 3 miles away.
Right.
And my children have a right to play in a creek.
Right.
Do
A right
they?
to free. This is enshrined in the Constitution of Montana.
Now, if
is
you
that you have a right to a healthy environment.
If you two lived right next to each other, the neighbor that has a cow farm and the neighbor that has children,
Right.
chances are the neighbor that has a cow farm would be like, oh my God, let me find a way to keep my cows out of that creek so that your kids can play in it. But what we're doing in human society is we're asking human pods, Homo sapien pods, to care about Homo sapien pods outside of their sphere of awareness.
Or expanding their idea of what a community is.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not saying judgment on that thing at all. Earlier, Astrid Selling, thank you so much for tuning in today. It's so nice to see you back on Post-Orthodoxy. Does a zebra have a right to eat a zebra?
Well, weird things happen in nature all the time.
And again, what does it mean, right?
Well, that if a zebra decided to eat another zebra, I think there might be consequences within the zebra realm.
And we've seen that happen.
Could be alienated, like, fuck that guy. And then he's no longer has the protection of the herd and he gets eaten by a lion, and then they've taken care of that problem.
Yes.
That feels like if the other zebras were disturbed, that they had a cannibal amongst themselves, I imagine they would have a reaction to that disturbance.
And we've seen that play out in animal groups before, where an animal gets sick or goes rogue, and the animals as a group enact consequences upon that rogue animal in some kind of way.
For the protection of the pack.
Yes, which usually comes down to isolation that leads to death.
I have so many things I want to, like the tree of topics that I wanted to get to today, because I think that goes directly to, unless I'm interrupting
it's okay.
the flow.
I'll bring it back if I have to.
It goes directly to one of our new government agencies, which is called the Disinformation Governance Board.
Yes. I have a little ditty from
with
the lady that's running
Oh,
that.
good. So the Disinformation Governance Board, which critics are calling the Ministry of Truth.
Seeing as it is.
It's the Ministry of Truth. It's serving that function. So they get to decide what is misinformation and what is not misinformation, or what is disinformation and what is not. So if the agencies that are misinforming us get to decide what misinformation is, it seems like kind of a problem.
Right.
Maybe we can go back to the boardroom a little bit on that one.
Seeing as even if we chopped out the last 4 years, we know our leadership in the U.S. government lies to us.
We
know that's happened.
It's policy. There's policy
yes.
that is in conflict with reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes the U.S. government lies to us for our own good, and we
that's
take
the story.
it. We suck the dick.
Right.
But we also know there have been times the U.S. government has lied to its citizens that was not for our own good.
Yeah, we know that.
We know that. So
that agency is now going to decide what is real and not real for us. So it feels dangerous. Feels dangerous when you live in a society that's talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that you have a Ministry of Truth that's going to decide what reality is. That feels...
You can just call her the Mary Poppins of
Wondering is
disinformation.
really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious.
Oh.
It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared bad intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain. They're laundering disinfo and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice or vote. Oh, information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origin seems slightly less atrocious.
I had 2 on-camera interviews today, and I still have a face full of makeup. What should I make a TikTok about? This is the woman that smothered Joe Biden's son's laptop full of child porn.
Yeah.
This is the woman that is also now running Biden's disinformation board.
And she made that.
And
they didn't like opposition teams didn't uncover that from her past.
No, she put that out on purpose. Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or in mainstream outlets. So disinformation's origins seem slightly less atrocious.
This has gone into so deep of a cartoon level.
It's so deeply ironic because it's like that's literally what you're doing. You are using a mainstream platform to spin lies to legitimize and then saying, oh no. Information laundering is when people use a mainstream platform to spin lies.
And so what are the lies? So what are the lies? That's the question. This is my favorite sentence that I pulled out of the Wikipedia article on this new government agency.
Okay.
DHS has declined requests to clarify the scope of the new Disinformation Governance Board.
What?
The DHS has declined requests to clarify the scope of the new Disinformation Governance Board. How's that? So, what's interesting is leading up to that is we have a link to the National Terrorism Advisory System. We've covered this on the show before, but I think with this new government agency, it's worth revisiting. So, if you go to the National Terrorism Advisory System, you'll find this bulletin, which is the top bulletin from February 7th, 2022. The United States remains in a heightened threat environment, fueled by several factors, including an online environment filled with false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories and other forms of dis, and malinformation, introduced and or amplified by foreign and domestic threat actors. These threat actors seek to exacerbate societal friction, to sow discord, and undermine public trust in government institutions, to encourage unrest which could potentially inspire acts of violence, mass casualty attacks, and other acts of targeted violence conducted by lone offenders and small groups acting in furtherance of ideological beliefs and or personal grievances pose an ongoing threat to the nation. Anyway, it's starting to get fuzzy at the end, but you get the idea. They're basically saying, we are the Ministry of Truth, and if you challenge the government narrative, then you are a terrorist. That's what that says.
In exactly that many words.
If you challenge the government narrative, which we know has been wrong, misleading, and outright a lie over the last 2 years, we could demonstrate very salient points in that. This is not a theory. We know that. And those people who we know have been lying to us can now say, if we disagree with them and we voice our disagreement, we can be viewed as terrorists.
Yes. And what does the U.S. do to terrorists?
Well, you don't get a trial.
Okay. What else does the U.S. do to terrorists?
They can take you away without, you have no rights. They take away your rights. If they deem you a terrorist, you don't have the rights of a regular citizen. So that means trial without jury.
Astrid says, whoa, like not being allowed to call a war a war? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If you...
Oh my God, thank you. Thank you.
Astrid, you're doing
right
the
on
show
the beam
for us. Oh my God.
All right, I want to go
you.
back.
Because this takes us right into...
the top story tonight.
The thing everybody loves to say when we get into legal and colloquial uses of the freedom of speech or freedom of expression right is, well, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Okay, so...
which has a horrific origin story you don't know.
You have heard that you cannot yell fire in a crowded firehouse. That was considered...
crowded
in
theater.
a maybe in a firehouse.
And why
you
not?
can.
Because if you yell fire in a crowded theater...
it could
people might get up and do a riot and get trampled.
Mayhem could occur, and there could be danger.
And
so you're endangering the public.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're endangering the public.
By yelling fire where there isn't one.
So this is an article from The Atlantic. I think it's from like 10 years ago. It's called, "It's Time to Stop Using the Fire in a Crowded Theater" quote. And
we brought this up in 2020.
Yeah, and I sum this up with this phrase, wherein encouraging citizens to, quote, to not, quote, submit to intimidation and to encourage citizens to stand up for our rights is equated with deliberately inciting mayhem and chaos. That's what that judge, that Oliver Wendell Holmes, when he said this, that equated danger with somebody encouraging you to stand up for your rights.
I had an interesting experience this week, very small sidebar, interesting experience this week with a group that we follow called I Acknowledge Psychedelic Class Warfare Exists.
I enjoy them on Facebook.
Fantastic community, very expansive conversations.
I don't agree with all their stuff, but I like the perspectives.
But I did get into a conversation that led to us doing this topic this week on does the cost-benefit analysis for freedom of expression pay off? And the leader of that page said, in conclusion, I don't care to spend my time discussing abstract rights.
Okay.
In the light of his presencing or awareness of actual, quote-unquote, physical, day-to-day rights violations. So he's not interested in talking about freedom of speech when we have homeless people. He's not interested in talking about freedom of speech when gay people can't get married. He's not interested in talking about freedom of speech. So that concept,
he's an avowed communist.
Yes.
So he calls himself a communist. So of course that would be in line with communist ideals.
And that was very interesting for me because I had not categorized natural rights of organic beings into abstract versus non-abstract rights. I think maybe he just means like you not having housing will hurt you a lot more than you not being able to speak.
Right. So let's deal with the more dangerous problem.
Right.
Yeah. So that's A to B is so trying to go A to Z.
Right.
So which is whatever. I value that approach.
I think it's very interesting.
But I also think a zoom out could inform how those other things play out.
Absolutely. We have to start with the core ethics.
So you can pull up that article or share the link.
Yeah, I will. You just do your thing.
It's the Atlantic, and it's called "It's Time to Stop Using the Fire in a Crowded Theater." Quote, this was used against us when we were kicked off KBMF. They said that what we were doing was akin to yelling fire in a...
They wrote it down. Yeah,
it's in the minutes.
Even though all the things that we were warning about have come true... And we weren't telling anybody to do anything unsafe.
In some ways, there actually was a fire.
There was a fire.
So there was reason to be saying fire.
Yeah, we were just smelling the smoke before other people smelled the smoke.
Exactly. So I'm going to read just the first few paragraphs. This guy does a great job on the article, so I'm just going to read it, and you can stop me in a moment if you want to do some discussion. The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. That was Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes in U.S. versus Schenck in 1919, 103 years ago. In the last few years, the quote has, and this is a 10-year-old article, by the way. In the last few years, the quote has reared its head on countless occasions. In September, commentators pointed to it when questioning whether the controversial anti-Muslim video should be censored. Before that, it was invoked when a crazy pastor threatened to burn Qurans. Before that, the analogy was twisted to call for charges against WikiLeaks for publishing classified information. Revealing war crimes is another way to say what happened there as well. The list goes on. But those who quote Holmes might want to actually read the case where the phrase originated before using it in their main defense. If they did, they realize it was never binding law, and the underlying case, U.S. versus Schenck, is not only one of the most odious free speech decisions in the court's history, but it was overturned 50 years ago.
Wow.
50 years from today, 40 years in the article. It was overturned the year I was born. First, it's important to note that U.S. versus Schenck had nothing to do with fires or theaters or false statements. Instead, the court was deciding whether Charles Schenck, the Secretary of the Socialist Party of America, could be convicted under the Espionage Act for writing and distributing a pamphlet that expressed his opposition to the draft during World War I. As the ACLU's Gabe Rotman explains, it did not call for violence. It did not even call for civil disobedience. The court's description of the pamphlet proves it to be milder than any of the dozens of protests currently going on around the country every day. It said, "Do not submit to intimidation, but in form at least confined itself to peaceful measures such as a petition for the repeal of the act. The other and later printed side of the sheet was headed, "Assert Your Rights." The crowded theater remark that everyone remembers was an analogy Holmes made before issuing the court's holding. He was explaining that the First Amendment is not absolute. It is what lawyers call dictum, a justice's ancillary opinion that doesn't directly involve the facts of the case and has no binding authority. The actual ruling that the pamphlet posed a clear and present danger to a nation at war landed Schenck in prison and continued to haunt the court for years to come. Two similar Supreme Court cases decided later the same year in Debs versus U.S. and Frowerk versus U.S. also sent peaceful anti-war activists to jail under the Espionage Act for the mildest government criticism. Read Ken White's excellent in-depth dissection of these cases. Together, the trio of rulings did more damage to the First Amendment as any other case in the 20th century. In 1969, the Supreme Court's decision in Brandenburg versus Ohio effectively overturned Schenck and any authority the case still carried. There, the court held that inflammatory speech and even speech advocating violence by members of the Ku Klux Klan is protected under the First Amendment unless the speech is, quote, directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action.
So this is saying that in the U.S., under the legal descriptions of the empirical belief in a human being's right to free expression, a person can get up on the courthouse steps in Butte and campaign for white rights legally and even empirically.
Right.
They have that right. However, they do not have the right to get up on the courthouse steps and try to get a crowd together to go and destroy a black-owned business.
That would be illegal.
That would be illegal.
Yes.
They cannot be standing on the courthouse steps calling out vocally for people to ban their neighbors from the grocery store if they're gay.
Lawless action.
Right.
So if you're not inciting a lawless action, if you're saying, hey, we should go petition the government to repeal this act because this war is whatever the reasons are, you should have that right. And the yelling fire in a crowded theater is the quote from that case. And then 50 years later, 1969, they overturned that.
Paul Niehaus says, what about Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots? Those got to pass for years. Now, we talked a bit about Antifa last week when we were talking with Stuart and the tides of countercultures. Antifa is a ideology and a movement that is ascribed to by many people all over the world in a variety of demographics. Antifa as an ideology is very simple: anti-fascism. Antifa as a movement is diverse as all of the people that ascribe to that movement. It is, at its core, an anarchist movement that does not have chief principles in place and rules and bylaws like many other organizations and groups that we're used to dealing with. So there is no head of the serpent to point to when you're talking about Antifa other than the core ideology of someone who claims to be Antifa, which is to fight against fascism. Now, there were many times during Antifa rallies that personal property got destroyed. Were people who are fighting against fascism destroying that personal property as part of their fight against fascism? Or was it people who were getting swept up in the mob and wanted to take one out on their neighbor that they hated? Or was it people who ascribed to the anti-fascist movement who were destroying that personal property because they knew that that person was an outspoken fascist? We don't know.
I think you're living out a big thing. Because
it's massive.
Antifa gets used, because it's headless, it's an organization, anybody can put on black and go do something and have it blamed on Antifa.
Same thing with
Right.
the Black Lives Matter movement.
This is the problem, is that because there is no organization
Same
and no
thing
structure.
with the Freedom Convoy, and same thing with any other movement.
So I've seen too much evidence of people using the guise of Antifa to commit violence in order to discredit Antifa.
Paul's
or in
bringing
order
up
to discredit whatever the movement
a
that
more
they're at.
specific example. Antifa is still showing up at Republican political rallies and disrupting them with smoke bombs, bullhorns, and intimidation. Are any of those things illegal?
It depends on how they're done. I don't know. I haven't seen that footage or know exactly what they were saying. But if they're in a public square, I mean, we had this terrible thing happen during George Bush where we stopped talking about freedom of speech and started talking about free speech zones. Like suddenly it just became accepted to talk about a free speech zone because people wanted to protest a Republican National Convention, and they said, you can't be on the street, the public street, in front of the convention, so we're going to create a free speech zone around the corner that is away from the thing where you can then go protest the thing where nobody will see you. And that got accepted. And so suddenly free speech was not the right of anybody in society to use in public. You were relegated, which is not fucking, that's not a free speech zone. That is some sequestered zone.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of a free speech zone.
It's a regulated speech
It's
zone.
a completely regulated speech zone.
Vlarik Shard says free speech zones make my blood boil.
Oh boy.
It's like a kid that's starving on the street and you're like, here, have a lollipop. Like, what the fuck? Paul says the question is, why are they allowed to do these illegal activities without arrest in many specific cases? How many of those activities are actually illegal?
I don't know.
I think
I
destroying
think
someone
you have to
else's
go case by
personal
case.
property is illegal, and that's is illegal. But throwing smoke bombs, there is a
there
clause.
may be fireworks ordinances where you can do it or not do it. What?
Exactly. Bullhorns, loud noises, intimidation, yelling, smacking shields like the olden day Vikings and shit. Like, I don't think that shit is illegal.
Oh, it depends on the place and the time. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Like when you're talking about all these cases, I'm like, every case has to be looked at. You have to figure out what the local statutes are. You have to figure, that's a complex issue.
Whether it's ethical, whether it's the best way to do it, whether it's the most productive way to enact change, those are different conversations than whether it is legal on that street to use those tactics
in that town.
And as far as I know, of all the leftists I know, they work really hard to make sure that whatever they're doing is legal so that they don't get caught up in stupid court battles and imprisonment.
Or unless you're an agitator pretending to be somebody else to give somebody else a bad name.
Exactly. So
which we know that happens all the fucking time.
The First Amendment does have a clause, time, place, and manner. Okay. The First Amendment's free speech clause, this is from the Cornell Law School Legal Information Institute.
Okay.
The First Amendment's free speech clause affords special protection to certain places traditionally open for speech activities, such as sidewalks and public ways, placing a heavy burden on any government attempt to restrict speech in what the court has identified as traditional public forums. But even in a public forum, the government may impose reasonable restrictions on the time, place, or manner of protected speech. So-called time, place, manner restrictions, provided those restrictions are justified without reference to the content of the regulated speech. So, for instance, the people that run the farmers market in Butte could put a restriction saying no one is allowed to rent a booth at the Butte farmers market for the purposes of political discourse. In which case, no one would be allowed to have a booth where there is public discourse happening.
Okay.
However, they cannot say Republicans are not allowed to rent a booth.
Right.
Or pro-lifers are not allowed to rent a booth. Or Black Lives Matter is not allowed to rent a booth. When I was a kid growing up and we campaigned around outside of abortion clinics, because I grew up super, super conservative Christian, we would, because we were living in Carbondale, Illinois, there were specific rules that my church looked up to make sure we were protesting legally. Above reproach. You want to be above reproach so that your message is the focus, not your behavior. So we had to keep walking. We could make signs. We could say things out loud, although our pastor discouraged us from engaging with people verbally. We just held signs and walked around the block for a few hours praying for the babies.
Right.
So In some cities, you can picket, as in you can take your sign and sit. But in a lot of places, you cannot sit.
Right. Loitering. That's loitering
that's
law.
Loitering.
Yeah.
You can't loiter. Some cities say that you can just set up a guitar and a hat and start playing. And some cities have laws where you have to get a license to be a busker.
Right.
So it's different in different places. Paul says using intimidation to shut down the free speech of others is fascistic.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Yeah. I believe that the DNC hires Antifa activists to be their shock troops, and it's for some magical reason just widely allowed. The magical reason is the U.S. government does not give a shit about our well-being, and they just do whatever they need to do to keep us in a dither against each other. I'm
going to throw out, I posted a couple of links to 2 articles in the YouTube comments because I think these are 2 things that came up that I've been thinking a lot about since the last few weeks. We've heard about censorship has been a big topic, fomented by the idea of Elon Musk buying Twitter. That was the subject.
Right.
He would say we would stop throttling people, provide free speech in terms of like not throttling accounts so that they're just shadow banned so people don't see them, or making posts where you can't share them. So you have to just go directly to their page. They're not going to show up in anybody's feed. You're not going to be able to share them from the feed. Or doing something like literally just removing people's accounts because they don't go along with the narrative, not because what they said was incorrect.
Right.
So
which has happened.
That's happened a lot. And so the idea is, and this is a TOS, this is not constitutional law. This is the terms of service.
You don't have
who gets to decide what is offensive
or
what is dangerous?
Whoever runs the terms of service. So that would be the owner and the board of that platform.
So I want to, in contrast to the battle over what censorship is okay, not is censorship okay, because that's where we're at here. I want to go back a little bit to like 1977, 79. Some of you may be familiar with this case. There's a link to an article. It's a ACLU article called The Skokie Case, How I Came to Represent the Free Speech Rights of Nazis by David Goldberger.
Oh, boy.
1977, the ACLU of Illinois received a call from a Nazi leader complaining that his planned demonstration had been blocked.
Is this in the U.S.?
This is in Skokie, Illinois. It's 1977. The ensuing legal battle and the controversy around it would test the organization's commitment to the First Amendment. About 50 years ago, this is from that guy who represented the Nazis. About 50 years ago, I led a team of dedicated lawyers from the ACLU of Illinois in representing a group of Chicago area Nazis who sought to hold a demonstration in downtown Skokie, Illinois. The Nazis' decision to go to Skokie provoked a storm of outrage because Skokie was a village that was nearly half Jewish and home to hundreds of Holocaust survivors.
Quite possibly intentional on
Quite
the Nazis'
possibly
part.
intentional. Skokie officials and their allies tried every possible legal device to block the demonstration, and their efforts triggered a barrage of lawsuits that quickly became known as the Skokie case. The village's discrimination to block the Nazi demonstration was so intense that it had the effect of turning the Skokie case into a landmark example of the vitality of the First Amendment, as well as the ACLU's fierce commitment to the principles that freedom of speech is a universal right, no matter how offensive the message or the speaker.
Universal human right, and this has also been agreed upon by the UN.
I want you to read that definition.
Yeah, in their Declaration of Universal Human Rights as well.
So you get the general idea. You can read the rest of the article, look up the Skokie case, and there's all kinds of perspectives on it. But that was definitely testing the integrity of an organization.
The organization being the U.S.?
The ACLU.
Oh.
So the ACLU was usually defending minority people without voices, so it's an organization to help people get equal treatment in society. Mm-hmm. It flipped it, and so they had to stick with their principles.
Were they actually going to have principles or just have a club?
So people would say now...
Principles or preferences?
It feels a little more like preferences. to some people than it does principles. This is what happened at our social justice organization, where they had principles that they have a 501c3 under, but they compromised the principles because of their preferences. That's a great phrase. We're going to have to
you always got to find an alliteration. That's what makes it stick.
So anyway, that article is interesting, and then there's another article called "The Left Needs the ACLU to Keep Defending Free Speech," and this is
free speech,
an article from the New York Times, which I think is fairly by Michelle Goldberg.
Oh boy,
what?
I don't know. I'm tired of everyone.
Michelle Goldberg said the left needs the ACLU to keep defending awful speech. And then she talks about her memory as a kid watching the Skokie thing and how even today as an adult, even though it's important to recognize the dangers of inciting speech and so on.
I prefer Nazis to not go to a Holocaust survivor town.
Yes.
That is different than having a universal principle on human rights.
Mm-hmm.
And when do your rights start fucking with my rights?
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into really abstract rights, like, do you have a right to feel comfortable? Do the Holocaust survivors have a right to not be reminded of their trauma? Like, these are new world rights, mental health rights. These are very new. Do you have the right? Like, this is where safe spaces come in.
Last week, I heard for the first time the term brave space, which I've just been thinking about all week. If you have a safe space, then of course there must be a brave space where people
can discuss difficult subjects,
are willing to work through triggers if they have them in order to broaden their understanding of each other.
In the physical realm, an important thing to think about when we're talking about inalienable human rights is that we are. Ooh, Paul Neos brings up a good point. We an inalienable human right, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not the guarantee of happiness.
Of course.
You must be free to pursue it, however.
Right, you must.
But you are not guaranteed to have it.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
You may have bad ideas about it.
Now, that's within the scope of how the U.S. defines inalienable human rights.
Yeah, do the
which
UN.
Is not the entire planet. No, I want to go back to... we have to hold in perspective anytime we're discussing freedom of speech or any other inalienable human rights, that we are living in multiple realms now. We don't just live in one realm anymore.
No.
Now we live in a physical realm.
Walking down the street, having a friend over for tea, how you behave at the grocery store. And we also live in the metaverse. We live in the physical universe, and we live in the metaverse. And Zuckerberg did not invent the metaverse. This is a term that's been used for a long time to talk about the network. And the network has been around since the 60s in various forms. People began being able to connect with and communicate and build community beyond their physical community. In a cyberspace.
A cyberspace, metaverse. So the rules and behaviors and belief systems and structures of your town that you live in and your neighborhood street that you live on and the community institutions that you visit physically in your day-to-day life, your job, your club, your bar, your barber shop, those are different and also all amalgamated into the network, the cyberspace, the metaverse. The metaverse and cyberspace is not governed by the same principles as the natural verse.
Constitution does not apply.
It does not. We in the 80s and 90s, there were people who were participating in the early days of the metaverse and the cyberspace who thought that we were at last creating a space where humans could communicate and build community with each other completely free, completely organically. And then a bunch of governing bodies came into play through capitalism and world governments that have limited, restricted, and shaped our ability to interact with the metaverse, which is where most of us spend most of our time. We don't spend most of our time in our physical towns anymore. We spend most of our time psycho-emotionally. Most humans in quote-unquote first world countries spend most of their time and their thought life in the metaverse, and it does not play by the same rules as the physical verse, and we do not have the same rights as we have in the physical verse, but we're all acting like we do, and we're getting mad about it. and we're fighting each other.
People talk to each other differently in the metaverse than they would at the
bar
across the fence.
Yeah, or across the fence in their neighborhood. So we have to begin. We got swept up in the grand scheme of things. Homo sapiens got swept up into this tidal wave of the metaverse and the cyberspace over the last 50 years, and we've got to get really aware and really self-aware of this realm that we're living in that is not the same as the realm that we physically live in. And what are we going to do about it? And what is it doing to us? And I don't mean like TikTok is ruining the kids, you know? Like, I mean, when you go on to Facebook to interact with your metaverse community, which is a different community with different flavors in the soup than your physical verse community. When you go into the metaverse to interact with your Facebook community, you need to understand it's not organic. You don't get to choose to avoid someone on the sidewalk if you don't want to talk to them.
It might be challenging.
And you don't get to choose to go to your favorite coffee shop because you know that your friends tend to go to that coffee shop after school. You might go to that coffee shop, but the chances of seeing your friends, the metaverse is more like parallel universes where you might all be inhabiting the same spaces, but you're being kept from interacting with each other. This is where we're coming into terms of service and censorship online and things like Elon claiming publicly multiple times that he wanted to buy Twitter to make it into an organic space where if you go to your favorite coffee shop that you know your friends like to go to, you will probably see them there. Whereas lately over the last few years, and I'll hand it over to you right after this, lately over the last few years, wherever you went in the metaverse online, you were not organically seeing and hearing from your metaverse neighbors. You were only seeing and hearing from your metaverse neighbors in approved ways at approved times. You have many friends who posted things over the last several years that you never got to see. You didn't get to make that choice. You can make those choices in the physical realm. You can't make those choices in the metaverse. This is part of why we're talking about freedom of expression.
The phrase that comes to mind is that your friends are getting disappeared from this new world.
And you don't know.
They are still in the physical world, but they are being disappeared.
From the metaverse.
From the metaverse. So your perceptions of the metaverse are being influenced by these filters where they decide what information you're going to see or not going to see. So I want to do a little case in point. I just got this morning. I've had my account restricted on Facebook.
Again.
Back in February, they gave me 90 days for posting a quote about the Nazi propaganda minister Goebbels talking about the dangers of censorship and propaganda.
But because a Nazi said it, you don't get to talk to people.
And so they said, we're going to take your post and lower them in the feed, whatever that means. That means people do not see stuff on time online with me.
I just want to give a tiny example.
Do it.
Because most of our listeners are in their 30s and up.
Right. Yeah.
Most of us that participate in Post-Orthodoxy, because of the platforms that we're using, we're talking to demographics that are in their 30s and up. A lot of us didn't have the internet for part of our lives. A lot of us didn't have the internet for most of our lives. So we are more rooted in physical verse examples and physical verse experiences that we translate the metaverse through, even though it's different universes. So, like the Rapture, or if you ever saw the TV show Fringe, or any other sci-fi show or an alien abduction show, where people in the physical world are walking around and then they see someone they know get zapped away.
Yes.
That feeling of, oh shit.
Yeah.
Where the fuck did Bob just go? And then Susie goes. And then my dog goes.
Right.
And you're just standing there and you're looking around and like half the grocery store is gone now. And everybody's looking around like, fucking, what is, like, you're freaking out because you're seeing people being taken away from your experience.
If you see them being taken away, and that's the problem.
And
yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Fucking ruined my punchline, man.
Oh, shit.
So up till now, we've always had the freedom to have an organic reaction to people being taken away from our experience of the world. In the metaverse, we do not have the freedom to experience people being taken away from your experience of the world around you. You spend your time online and you don't get to see people being raptured out of your perception. So you don't get the freedom to have that oh shit reaction of where the fuck are these people going and why? Is it aliens? Is it the government? Is it the rapture?
I don't think we can overstate how dangerous that is to a society and to a community. It's seriously messing with people's perceptions. It's conscious manipulation of your perceptions. So I've been knocked down another 90 days as of this morning. So Facebook said, you posted this thing last month and we don't like it. They said it was partly false. Would you mind going to the document where I have this list of these fires? Some of you may or may not know that there's been a spate of fires at food processing plants in America.
Depending on what the people running your online consciousness are allowing you to see.
So the list in front of you is, I don't know how many that is, like 22 maybe. So it's 22 places and the dates of food plants that caught on fire, exploded, or had a plane crash into them in the last 6 months. Now, just take that all in. 22 food processing plants have caught on fire or had planes crash into them in 6 months. I posted that in my story on Facebook with no commentary.
Just posted those dates.
Places, dates, company, cause of the destruction at the plant.
Yeah. And there's only one airplane crash listed here, Vlarik Shard, but there have been
apparently
three. There's been at least 3 that I could find immediately online when I looked for airplane crash food plant just in the last couple months.
Oh, and this morning there's a brand new one that I was looking at. So I was like, that's not even on the list or whatever. So that's, I don't know, as a human who
if you knew about that,
wants
you would
to
be
be in the world,
wondering what
like,
was going on.
Why are there like 24 food processing plants burning?
But
like,
if
why
you
is that?
haven't been shown that that's what's going on, then you don't get to wonder about it, and it will not inform how you spend your time.
It feels very insidious. So I got a little note. If you scroll down to the next image, I got a little note. We added a notice to your post, and it was just a story. It was only there for 24 hours. They said the partly false information in the post that I shared. I Googled all those places. That is all completely correct.
That post with those dates is absolutely true.
That is all true. I took the time, you can't even cut and paste that. You just have to like leave fire in the search and then just put in the name of the place and they all come up with those dates. So that's, third-party verified stuff going on. So they said that what part of it was false. We're going to visit some friends of ours, some friends of Post-Orthodoxy, which is the organization called Fact Check. What are they called? True Stories?
Lead Stories.
Lead motherfucking Stories. So Lead Stories, which we've told you before, is financed by the Rand Corporation.
The problem when they put the fact check notice on these things is all it does is imply to the viewer's mind that this information is untrustworthy and therefore dark is untrustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the actual fact check is saying recent fires at U.S. food processing plants do not show a plot to cause a food shortage. That may or may not be true. But Dark sharing,
I didn't say anything about a plot.
A list and then it's not false. That list is not false. We don't know. Mercurius RX is like, what the fuck?
Right.
Who's attacking food plants? We don't know, Mercurius. And rest in peace, the poor saps that died in the 3 airplane crashes that have happened so far.
Right.
That's a horrible
Wait,
way.
is 3 plane crashes now?
Yeah, this list is incomplete.
Well,
I found 3 when I looked for them.
I heard 2 plane crashes, and I'm like, that seems a little stretch. And now there's another one.
Vlarik Shard says, "Methinks she does protest too much." It does not.
This does not mean a secret plot to cause a famine. It doesn't mean. I didn't say anything about a famine.
Wait, a food shortage?
What are you talking about?
That is exactly like that funny scene in the movie where somebody's like, "I wasn't at the theater last night," and you're like, "Wait, I didn't say anything about the theater."
Yeah, what theater? Why were you not at this theater last night?
Guys, we're being manipulated all the time.
So this is egregious. And if you can scroll down to that image, there's an image of the Lead Stories fact checker page of the Rand Corporation. If you're not familiar with the Rand Corporation, on a rainy day, just go down that rabbit hole of who they are. But you get their budget. They're basically funded by the military-industrial complex, and they're the ones saying nothing is happening at the food plants. There is no conspiracy by the government to create artificial scarcity. None whatsoever, says the government.
Right.
That is funding the fact-checking.
That has lied to you.
Holy shit. Like, how many times can we say that? And people are like, meh, okay, I'm just going to get some food and go back to work tomorrow. None of it matters anymore.
Go back to bed, America.
Jesus Christ. So anyway, that happened. So for me sharing a list of current fires in food processing plants with no commentary, I've now been kicked down for another 90 days on Facebook. So if you have to go to my page, but I'm not even doing Facebook anymore because it's become senseless. Unlike your example of the people being booped off the planet, the dogs they're much more popular now.
The dogs don't get raptured.
They're much more, like, if I put on my dog on my Facebook page, 50 people come through and start saying stuff, right? Yeah. If I mentioned that 22 food manufacturing plants caught on fire in the last 6 months, then they tell me there's no conspiracy, and they make sure that nobody sees me for 90 days.
Valaric Shard says, there is no war in Ba Sing Se. What's that from?
I don't know, but it sounds like a movie.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
Yes, exactly.
So why is all of this important? Does it matter? Does it matter? Do you have the right to know what you are allowed to know or not?
I hope people are like really angry and inflamed at this point. Here, I'm going to do more angry faces on Facebook.
Yeah, throw some angry faces on Facebook, yo.
I'm just going to do angry faces.
Oh, it's from Avatar: The Last Airbender. There is no war in Ba Sing Se. So, Astrid shared an example similar to this ACLU issue.
Oh.
She said, we just had that exact situation in Sweden a couple of weeks ago. A Danish neo-Nazi applied and was permitted to have a public demonstration against Islam in towns and parts of towns with a lot of immigrants. He applied and was permitted to burn the Quran. Interesting. The government can give you permission to burn a religious text. Of course, there were huge riots that turned into burning cars, police cars, etc., etc. The question now is where the quote-unquote problem is. The complete free right of speech, is that the problem? Or the reaction of feeling deliberately attacked or addressed? So was the problem who should get punished in that situation? Now, are we talking about people's empirical rights and natural organic consequences? Or are we talking about people's legal rights and legal consequences within a defined social structure? So within a defined legal social structure of Sweden, that man, as far as Astrid's telling us, did not do anything illegal.
Illegal, right.
However, in reaction to him burning the Quran, a bunch of people rioted and did illegal things.
That inflamed some social agreements where people said, we don't like that in our society.
Right. So other people faced consequences for that man's legal actions that socially and colloquially were unacceptable.
So that's where we get into a slippery slope of you cannot go up and incite damage, but some people can say if they go up and say something, that will cause a reaction that is the same thing as him inciting it.
And this is...
Or calling it to happen, asking for it to happen. You know, he's asking for it, but he's not asking for it. So he's not actually doing it. So it's like the kid in the back seat that's like, Mom, and he's like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you, right? That's what that is. Like, I'm not touching you.
That was all of my childhood, honestly, was watching my parents punish the person that did something empirically wrong.
Yes.
Or legally wrong, but not punish the person that had caused the thing.
This is where it gets really, I feel like if we
Because it would have taken a lot more time and effort to actually investigate and bring up correct and useful and productive consequences for the kid that was just whispering quietly right next to the other kid over and over and over again.
A society might think it is more prudent to limit expression in a broad way.
This is a cost-benefit analysis.
Rather than have to weather all these people saying, I'm not touching you. So like just reducing, the society says we're going to reduce that.
So
now,
if we're talking about general societal harm.
Yes. Is that setup and punchline an engineered consent designed to have us give up rights? As some people would say that these events are engineered
many times
so that we willingly give up our rights.
And this is where it goes back to the example of the zebra group versus the other zebra group further down the river that they don't know about. Human society is collectively trying to expand our consciousness and our choices beyond the experience of ourselves and our direct community. So if we make, like, we're talking about trying to get humans to elevate their consciousness to the point where they care about human society in general more than their own individual experience.
Right.
So it is more important to prevent rioting in the streets than it is for me to be allowed to burn a Quran in the streets.
That's a logical agreement. But
If you're looking at cost benefit, one causes way more damage than the other one.
Well, in the short term, but this is what happens over time, is that stuff never goes back, right? Once the sort
law
of totalitarianism creeps. So when the rights get eroded, they don't go back without some conflict.
Yeah.
So what happens is we get used to being more and more kettled and caged, so that when it gets past the point of human rights, there has to be a pushback. And that pushback may be odious to a lot of the people who feel safe within their cage of perceptions of what is appropriate.
One of my main questions leading into this conversation: what is the inalienable right of human expression? How can we categorize it within colloquial society and legal ramifications? And who gets to decide in each sphere that we exist in what expression you are allowed to have?
So then I would say, why do you got to be a control freak, man? I would say that that's a natural progression. Like when constriction is too tight, people then break the system that's making that. It's a natural thing. Some people would have different feelings about how healthy that is for us, or feelings about some of the mechanisms involved in that. But that's sort of a natural process where we will put up with so much shit and then we don't put up with it as societies.
So at what point, I was kind of thinking about this in the opposite. I've noticed that all of the people advocating for regulated speech, legally and colloquially, or legally and socially, all of those people are advocating from a position where the regulations on expression being put into place do not affect them. Now, to use a concrete example, most of the people in the U.S. advocating for regulations on freedom of expression are in the bluish camp, mostly liberal leftists kind of people, and they are advocating for a limitation on freedom of expression that affects people that might have grown up in the South and use racial slurs. They should not be allowed to do that. Now, the leftists are already not using racial slurs.
Right.
They're asking for a limitation on freedom of expression that prevents a business from firing someone who comes out as gay. So they're limiting the business's freedom of expression. Maybe it's a business that religiously does not align with gay, and they don't want to be expressing that as part of their...
Well, their liberty. It's infringing on their liberty to pursue whatever they're trying to pursue in the world.
I was like, what's the inverse of that? does a human being ever advocate for a regulation on freedom of expression that limits themselves? And have there been any examples of that?
It's important to watch that. I think there can be some agreement socially. I think it's like a mission creep. It keeps happening more and more, and then eventually it becomes untenable. But because of mass formation psychoses or just
mass manipulation online,
culture and tribalism, people will put up with a lot of shit in order not to be bothered.
Yeah.
I don't want to bother to change it. It's not that odious. I guess I don't really need to do anything to change it. But eventually, but that never goes backwards until people say fuck off, and as a society, as a group. So it has to affect the broad swath of society. So it seems like we've been divided, and we have lots of little fights. That if we had a Venn diagram of what we were really unhappy about, we would have enough people to say, okay, guys, we've got a little too far. We need to be having some debates. We need to be discussing ideas instead of shutting down ideas. We need to have ideas challenged instead of having the challengers gagged. We have to be brave enough to actually explore some things that are outside the consensus and the status quo. We have to be brave enough. And there are a lot of people who are willing to do that, but we're so busy fighting in our little individual battlefields that the larger battlefield never gets the critical mass that is necessary to stand up and say, we got to take care of our neighbors, whether we like them or not. We do have to take care of our neighbors, because if they're having a bad time, eventually it bleeds over to me having a bad time.
Well, now, if we zoom out, this was brought up in my conversation on I acknowledge psychedelic class warfare exists. The general reason why people advocate for regulated speech is to prevent possible harm.
Right.
Why do we institute any law? All laws should be to prevent harm. That's the point of the government, right? That's the historic and ethical point of a government is to prevent harm. And so if a law is being instituted, it should be to prevent harm. So if we're going to regulate speech, for instance, during the COVID times, people were being canned and shut down and censored and shadow banned, ostensibly from the principled place that we need to keep anyone from hearing those words to prevent harm. Because if people hear those words, they might think that they don't have to get a vaccine. Or they might think that it's not as dangerous to play at the park. Or they might think that the mask isn't really helping very much. So we have to stop anybody from presenting that data or talking about those ideas.
So the idea of preventing harm.
Yes.
Now, the interesting thing is that it's sold as a way to prevent harm to your loved ones.
And the same thing with earlier issues such as racial issues. We cannot allow people to behave in racially harmful ways, to speak racially harmful things. Like we can't allow people to speak hate speech. The campaign against hate speech towards people with disabilities, towards minorities, towards LGBTQ community, that on principle, that campaign existed because when it is the theory is when it is acceptable to talk in a hateful, harmful way, it creates a pathway towards it being acceptable to act in a hateful, harmful way.
Gotcha.
So, for instance, when it's acceptable culturally for people to make fun of quote unquote retards and speak and think harmfully about people with mental disabilities, you have instances where police end up beating up or killing someone with Asperger's because that person does not know how to respond to what the police officer needs.
Right.
So that's what they're talking about. And Mercurius RX says the modern notion that words are violence can backfire so quickly. So we have words are violence, and then on the flip side, we have sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. So one is an old idea, one is a new idea, and we sort of swung the pendulum all the way the other direction to words are violence. And is that causing the results that we need in society in order for people to be safe and healthy?
Right. So when you say that these things we are moved as a society to limit freedoms under the premise that we will be reducing harm.
Yes.
Then I think that for the first thing that does to me is say harm to who?
Okay.
So there's the ostensible people you're protecting from harm. The thing that you also may be protecting from harming is a corrupt system.
Well, but that's not what people think they're doing.
Right. No, but how much of it is that there is conscious, divisive rhetoric and propaganda that keeps people divided? And these little things, well, you have to reduce harm, which reduces rights, which makes people whose rights are being resisted now be in conflict with the people that would limit their rights. That cycle is preventing harm to the system that is creating those divides. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So our care is being manipulated against us.
I did a lot of thinking about the difference between censorship and consequences. They're two different things. A lot of people, I think, well-meaning people, are advocating for censorship of harmful ideas when we would have more productive change in society if we advocated for consequences of harmful ideas.
Accountability.
Yes.
Yes.
So just shutting shit down does not make it go away. Education changes society. Censorship does not change society. You change no minds in a censored environment. You can only have your mind can only change in a vulnerable space, either through trauma enacted on you in a vulnerable space or compassionate education enacted on you in a vulnerable space. Your mind doesn't change when you're not vulnerable, and when you are being censored, you are in a defensive mode, and you are not vulnerable. Your mind does not change. Society does not change. Censorship does not change society. Education can change society. Consequences can change society. Our care is always manipulated against us, says Mark French. This is what we're struggling with.
Our care is being weaponized against us.
Yes, in
it's
multiple
weaponized.
fields, over and over and over again.
I'm going to share a link to a post I wrote last week on my Substack page, so that if you do not go to my Substack page because you didn't know it was there, now you do. It's a little poem. I wrote some prose, little poem a couple of weeks ago. And one of the lines from in there was something to the akin of being banned is the new brand. CNN, what's they're called? CNN Plus, whatever, $300 million to spawn a pay us for our bullshit station that I think got like 10,000 subscribers, and they folded within 30 days. Like, meanwhile, people who are actively being throttled, like Joe Rogan, who's being attacked on the legacy platforms, is gaining 2 million people because they're saying don't listen to him. Being banned is the new brand. And so I think I'm really excited. This is the thing that happens when you bullshit too long. Eventually people see through the bullshit. And this is what we're seeing with Joe Rogan and CNN. Mm-hmm. That's people saying, okay, I'm not that big of a fucking sucker. So I'm encouraged. I feel like we are in a natural arc. The absurdity has to reach a critical mass. It's always a little surprising to me that we actually go down the road as far as we do in situations like this. Like the story of the last 2 years is one of those things where there's enough information, if you are at all mildly curious about the idea that maybe corporations and the government don't have your best interest in mind. If there's a little doubt there.
You ever wonder?
If you're like, I wonder if that's possible. You can find out if they actually give a fuck about you, and they don't.
Oh my gosh, it's been so good having everybody.
I don't want to give up
participating
yet.
today.
I don't want to go yet.
We can.
Wait, was there anything else I wanted to talk about? Let me go back to my notes.
Oh, wait. Yes, absolutely. I have plenty more to talk about on this subject. Post-Orthodoxy is not about pitching our tent on an idea.
No.
This is something that came up for me when I was talking.
Oh, I know what we
I
wanted
acknowledge
to do.
psychedelic class warfare exists. About freedom of expression is we're not talking about choosing, pitching, building a cabin, building a city, staying there forever. We're exploring. It's called an outpost in the Borderlands. We go exploring, other people go exploring, and we all share our ideas around the campfire. Like I said earlier, I'm building a personal theorem, an ethical theorem on what I think about empirical, organic freedom of expression versus legal freedom of expression versus social, colloquial freedom of expression. And I'm open to having that changed and challenged. I know that my experience of human life is not everybody's experience of human life. I'm not experiencing human life the way that a trans person experiences human life. And I'm not experiencing human life the way that a child in South Africa experiences human life. And I'm not experiencing human life the way that a black person experiences human life. Like, these are all the tropes that come up. But my experience of life and the ethics that I come up with based on my experience and what I think is going on is not the be-all, end-all of the universe, which is why I want to have an interactive forum where people can say, well, actually, this is why I think this about freedom of expression. This is why I think this about freedom of expression. And so when we're talking about freedom of expression, we're here to have a conversation and to make an intro and then make another intro and then make another stab and then make another stab. And you guys are doing that with us, and that's really awesome.
I'd like to confess that I've limited my expression tonight.
What do you mean?
I have purposely limited my expression in order to conform to social constructs and not deal with possible consequences.
You mean you wore pants?
No, I'm not looking at your boobs all the time.
Oh,
I know you caught me. I know you caught me looking a couple of times. Like, part of me's like, but because like that's what I want to do.
Well,
I just want to look at your boobs because I can still hear you when I'm looking at them.
Right.
But then I'm like, well, that feels like a wrong thing to do. So
that's so interesting.
I should just look
we're
at.
Married.
I know, but we are in a social sphere. So me just checking out your boobs when you're really excited about something, yes. Feels like the natural expression for me, but then I curtailed it a little bit because we're in a social sphere and I don't want to make people think bad of me. I don't know. It's
we
really
should explore
interesting.
that more in another episode. What we want to do is have more than one of these conversations every week. We've had a really good audience today. We had about 15 people tuning in today. And it's really hard to get an audience together when none of the apps that we're on tell you when we're live. And
we're being shadow banned and throttled, people.
We don't have an email group that we send out to you to tell you that we're live. And you're not all available at 12 Montana time on a Sunday.
But that can change.
But what we want to do is have more than one show a week at different times and do it often enough that we are building a community together and we're used to talking to each other more often. And we all put our brain soups together and come up with a better soup.
Okay, we often challenge ourselves. We ask our audience sometimes we challenge their ideas, not in an aggressive fuck you way, but in a like, what do you think about this thing? You know, maybe a different size shoe is good for your foot. I don't know. It's a little small. So I like challenge. And so I'm going to challenge myself right now on the show.
Oh boy.
Challenge it.
Let's go for it.
It's really hard.
I'm going to switch to your camera, so look at your camera.
It's really hard to self-promote. It's really hard to say, you know what, give us money to keep doing what we really like doing. It's hard to say that. So, but I'm going to say it because it's really important. We're getting throttled on our in the commons where we gather together to see what everybody's doing. We've been disappeared from the commons. Some of you see our stuff. Some of you also look for our stuff. So we need help. We do have a website and we haven't done the branding. We haven't made it easy to do this, but we're trying to get $1,000 this year. No, 1,000 subscribers who do a recurring payment of $5 a month on their credit card.
Do the beer bit.
Less than a fucking beer.
Do the beer bit.
How many times have you been at the bar and been like, let's have one more beer. Maybe I'll have one more beer.
Yeah.
One of those beers, just one night of one of those months, less than that beer. If you could just put it on your credit card and say, hey, let's support these guys so they can do more stuff like this. Because we're doing this for you, and we really love that you have been involved in the discussion. Not everybody can be involved in the discussion. A lot of people have to listen to our show after the fact.
Those people can also give us a beer a month.
They can give us a beer a month, yes.
Because you get 8 hours right now. You're getting 8 hours of interesting fucking conversations with people from all over the world.
Yes.
On our podcast. So you can it's, Vlarik Shard says, especially dark beer, like a good Calvinist.
Yes.
You're doxing yourself.
Let's put in a link to how people can sign up. Because I think if people subscribe and they give us $5 a month to help support, $5 to you is really, it ain't shit. frankly. $5 a month, you could totally do it.
With inflation being what it is, $5 is not going to be the difference.
Still in a month. No, it ain't going to affect your bottom line.
Not in 1 month.
We get penalized all the time with shit, like $30 parking ticket, whatever. Just drive safer, park smarter, and give that money to us. Support us in this endeavor. You can find us at postorthodoxy.com, which is a page on our larger website called Better Time. Yeah. BetterTI.me.
Because that's what we're out for, is to have a better time with more people more often. And you guys are the OGs of those people. Tell your friends. I know that you all know somebody that wants to be a part of shit like this and or thinks that somebody should be talking about this shit even if they don't have time for it.
Support us in doing that. I mean, I know that there's a really great Bill Hicks joke. That's, he wants to start a group for people who hate people. It's kind of where we're at. You kind of have a hard time getting people together. Like people who have been
so
atomized and alienated from society, that have been beaten up, who've tried to help, who've tried to change, have gotten involved with the movement, had to deal with a nonprofit, like people who've really wanted to do something and got beaten back into submission, are not inclined to try it again, to try to be a part of something again. And we want to maybe be a place for the land of misfit toys. People who really want to be a part of society, really want to think that we could actually have a vision and move towards something good instead of being in a constant reaction to the crisis of the fucking day. We could be doing the other thing, and I want to talk to people who think that we could be doing that thing or could be convinced, because then we could have a better time.
We could be having a better time.
So $5 a month would be splendid.
Even if you don't agree with everything that we're saying, because that's our top review on Post-Orthodoxy.
You can also give us $100 a month. That would be great too.
Our top review on Post-Orthodoxy is I used to have people, back when we were on the radio station, I would have guys in work trucks stop at a stop sign and yell out their window. They're like, "You're that girl from the radio. I don't disagree. I don't agree with most of the shit you say, but you're doing something that's really important."
Yeah, that was often our common review.
That's our top review.
I don't like a lot of the stuff that you do.
My friend Jerry just said that last Thursday. He was like, "Oh, I'll support the show. I don't agree with most of the things you say, but I'll give you $5 a month." And I'm like, none of us agree with most of the things we say.
Yeah, it's true.
It's an illusion that we've been force-fed that we should be living in a homogenous society. We don't, and we're not. But we can be neighbors healthfully and non-harmfully and disagree with each other.
Yeah, I'm going to make a couple of posts here. We need to promote a YouTube channel.
Woot, woot, woot.
Our
friend of the show,
Boyce Brown, and friend of the show, Mark French, have collaborated.
Boyce Brown is starting a new online art forum. You can find him at, what's his name?
Stonefruit.
Stonefruit at stonefruit.substack.com.
Yep.
He writes a lot. It's very interesting and unique writing. And now he's doing a YouTube channel on his Stonefruit Media YouTube channel. And he's doing some long-form conversations about important subjects that might be your style, called The Hard Line.
The Hard Line. And his first piece is, I think, a heartfelt call to action for himself to say, hey, folks that give a shit, let's do something, even if it's small steps. Let's agree to stop participating as much in our own doom and destruction. And let's maybe think a little bit about what we can do from here. And I think Boyce does an excellent job of providing context, a perspective of our history and societal trends that help us move towards actually having a shared vision of where we can go as humans on a planet, or even people in a town. We could be doing so much more with each other right now, and all these stupid divides over all these prescribed fucking distractions and everything they're wearing thin. So it's not like we have to go out and change the world. It's like the world is changing, and we are going to change it in a way that is less painful for the majority. That's what happens over and over in society. It gets onerous, authority gets onerous, authoritarianism comes in, psychosis happens, and then suddenly nature says, fuck all that. And there's a little bit of a shift, sometimes a really big shift. And it doesn't always have to be about destruction. There was the Enlightenment at one point, which came after a really bad time.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the Enlightenment was like, fuck you, oppression. It was just like, oh, okay, we're done with that shit. Let's let's go do something else.
Get more literate and read some books.
Let's go throw rocks in a lake for a little while. So this is what we're doing. We're involved in a big question of how we could be having a better time more often and finding more people that are interested in that subject and would like to be having a better time with more people more often. So you can find our website. You can read a little bit of propaganda about who we are, what we're doing, how we're doing it. Go to the credit card page, which is postorthodoxy.com, and give us a recurring payment so that we can continue to do what we're doing for you in bigger and better ways and increase
this community,
the conversation.
Community.
Yes, we want to have more conversations instead of censoring people and editing people and deciding that people cannot be a part of our group. We actually want to invite people in and have a larger group.
We want to create a diverse space. So
I'd like to have my ideas challenged.
What are we doing right now for free? Right now for free for the last 3 years, we've been doing basically a show a week, which is 2 hours, 4 times a week. So that's 8 hours right there. Mm-hmm. Each show takes a lot of prep work and research. So let's just say 6 hours a week of prep, which is extremely low.
Yep.
And does not include... we'll say 10.
I'll say 40.
$5 each.
Okay.
5 hours each.
Okay.
Let's just say.
Okay, let's be conservative.
Conservatively.
Yeah, we'll get really down to it.
Let's say you and me each spend an hour a day preparing to do this show.
Okay.
Let's just say. So that's 48 hours a month.
Okay.
Then I listen to each show afterwards and turn it into a podcast. So that's 8 more hours of me listening to the show if I don't have to do any editing.
And then I do a bunch of editing, but I listen to it in double speed, but it's still some hours.
Right. So 16 more hours. So 48, 56, 60. Oh boy. 62.
Okay.
And then the product that results from that work is 8 hours of podcasts to listen to. So that's 8 hours worth of product. So 70 hours. So 70 hours a month of our effort, which includes 16 hours of product.
Yeah.
Divided. Let's just multiply that by what's a living wage?
I don't know. I have no idea.
$12.
No, let's say $15 an hour. Let's say that's the big number that everybody says. You should have this starvation wage. You feel good about it.
Hour.
Yeah.
You know, that's So 70 times 15. So that would be $1,000 a month.
Okay.
That's not very much.
No.
That's only $1,000 a month divided by 5. That's 200 people. I'm sorry I didn't do that math in my head. 200 people at $5 a month would bare minimum cover less than the hours that we put into the current content
200 people
that people have access. 200 people.
Right.
200 people. When we get let's just say when we hit 200 people, if we get more than 200 people, then we can start adding content. We can start adding shows.
Yes, right. When we can just cover our ass.
Let's just get 200 people.
That's not including
make $5 a month. Let's just cover our
start
bare
with the
minimum
200
ass,
people.
Right.
So we're going to make this into a little shorter video.
We're going to do some little videos. We're going to do some propaganda. You can share it around. You can invite friends. Do you have friends that listen to Russell Brand? Do you have friends that listen to the Dark Horse podcast?
Jimmy Dore.
Do you have friends that listen to Jimmy Dore or Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan?
The Gray Zone.
The what's that one with the 2 kids that yell at each other over the pyramid? They look like a news thing, but they're on YouTube.
Oh, I don't know. Glenn Greenwald.
No, the 2 young people, the Young Turks.
Oh, fuck those guys.
I know they've had some issues, but there are people out there that were listening to the Young Turks.
I was listening to them at one point.
Because it was not the mainstream news.
Right.
If you who gets their information from podcasts? Find those people and send them our way and see if they'd like this shit.
Know who is paying for the content that you receive.
You could be paying for the content you receive.
You could know that it is supported by you and that we don't have some hidden agenda. If we do get sponsored by some big multinational corporation, we will divulge that. But right now, we've had no offers.
Yes. Pia says, is it possible to share a recording of this discussion on Facebook? Yes. This video will live in perpetuity on our Facebook page on Post-Orthodoxy. It usually takes it like 30 seconds to kind of crunch the video down and then make it shareable. But then you can just share it in a message to people.
Also, you can find this same video, but with a different comment thread over at Twitch TV. And after the show is done, I go through and I pull out what we call microdoses, maybe a 2-minute, maybe a 15-minute, maybe a 20-minute piece that are not the full 2-hour show for more pointed distribution of our propaganda.
You know what we would love? We would love to hire someone and pay them real money that they could use to do shit with in order to populate our social media. We would love to hire someone to make sure that this content gets into the eyeballs of people that want to have conversations like this.
Yeah.
So that we can have more conversations like this, so that we can do a series of videos on freedom of speech for an entire week on inalienable human rights and social agreements.
Yeah, here's what we want to do.
Damn.
Here's what we want to do. Like, so basically, I want the smartest people I can find, the most concerned people I can find.
I don't even have time to write letters to invite people to be on our show now.
No, so like if you know somebody who you think is smart, please ask them to watch our show so they can tell us that we are also smart or tell us how to become smarter because we're not.
And we would love to have them on.
We want that. We want to be challenged by people who you think are challenging or people who you think are the end-all be-all and they have it all figured out. Like, we want to be exchanging ideas so that we don't have to just doom scroll every day. We could actually show up and say, what is the progress? Where is it? How is it being built? Where were the breakthroughs? And start focusing on the fucking amazing shit that's happening at this point of, whatever you call that, late capitalism. There is a new world being born, one consciously with a website on the World Economic Forum, but there are other people with other ideas that do not have the same amount of marketing. So before we just fold into the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, let's explore our options. Let's see who else has got some ideas about how to be in the world and have a good time. Because I know they're out there. If you know those people, if you know them personally, or if you know them through resources that you find online or in books, please contact us. Send us a note through the Post-Orthodoxy page. Either you can comment on our video on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or you can find us on our website. Can they contact us on our website?
Yeah.
Can they send us an email?
All of our contact info is on there and an email contact form.
So if you do the $5 a month thing, bare minimum, then we can start building a community. We can have a list of people and say, hey, bitches, we got this thing coming on Tuesday, and it's going to be a special show, and we're just letting you guys know, show up for this thing or whatever. We can actually start talking to the people who want to talk about the things that we're talking about. So anyway.
Speaking of smart people that we know that think we're smart.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, Jack and Lucy popped on and said,
oh, nice.
You're smart.
Oh, yay.
Yay. And Norm Goodwin, did you just find the show, Norm? We've been live for 2 hours already.
I invited him, but he works.
That's me not dissing you. I'm just mad at the algorithm because it keeps people from even knowing that we've gone live.
Right. That's why we're asking for the $5 a month. So we can, if nothing else, you're paying $5 to stay in the loop because the show is going to be morphing, changing, growing, and hopefully we can do it more often. And the more that you find people to help us do what we're doing, the better we can do at it. So there was some other amazing propaganda technique I was going to use, but I forgot.
Mark French said 24-hour shows.
Yeah, we want to do a 24 hours. Oh God. So until we get 1,000 people doing at least $5 a month, I would like to, have a
let's set some goals.
Marathon.
Yes.
So that all the people who are up at all the hours have the experience to not see our stuff online because it's throttled.
Right.
So that would require friends sending notes to people saying, hey, there's this thing.
You live in this time zone.
We've been disappeared from the comments. It's not going to show up in your feed.
We used to be able to jump up on a box in the middle of my town and talk to my neighbors.
Yes.
And now my neighbors are in the Metaverse, which means they're all over the world. And I can no longer get up on a box and talk to you about something unless the platform that I'm using says that you get to hear what I'm trying to talk to you about.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is live right now. We do a live show every Sunday from 12 to 2 Montana time, and then we turn it into a podcast, and the videos stay on Facebook for a while, but we've been doing a live show every Sunday for a long time. Deb Lynch, the chef, would be an awesome guest.
Oh, yes.
We've dabbled with the idea many times. Why was he never a guest?
I don't know. He's Tuesdays. He's here on Tuesdays and not
he's
Sundays.
Never here on Sundays. But we should make it happen.
We want to be doing special shows.
Yeah.
By the way, so we talked about Stone Fruit and the Stone Fruit channel on.
Yes.
So that's Mark French and
And I don't know.
Voice
I don't know
and
if
Stone
Mark's going
Fruit.
to be. I don't know if Mark's going to be a guest every week.
Well, I'm saying that's what's happened. There's a few episodes. It's a new endeavor.
Guests of Post-Orthodoxy met each other and made content.
So the media empire is growing. So yeah, there's more content. I'm also going to share this video. Oh, I don't know where that one is. Never. I'm not going to do it. Mark French, who's been involved at the genesis here of the Stone Fruit Media Project, is decided that Zoom is not good enough, that he's flying up here this week and will be live in studio to talk about all the things we like to talk about. What is collapse? Is collapse happening? Who is BlackRock? You know, all these things which we never get answers on.
Show.
Always make good conversations. And we'll probably be doing more than one show. So if you want to keep up with what's going on, please give us $5 a month. Just do it, and then we'll have your email. And then also, you can...
Now, we haven't made a MailChimp yet, but maybe that's what we need to avoid the throttling.
How else do we communicate with you? Let us know. Give us ideas. Tell us how to do it. We're trying to figure this shit out right now. Like, if you would like to see more of this stuff, help us figure out how to do it, because we're really busy.
Here's what you got to do. You got to go on our Facebook page.
We're going to do this for 24 fucking hours straight.
Well, people are going to have to listen to us eat while we do it then.
That's fine.
And
we can take breaks.
We have to eat.
We can play like a 5-minute video of like, hey, this is Terrence McKenna talking about mushrooms or whatever. You know, we can have little interludes.
All right, you got to go to the Facebook page. You got to go to the Facebook page. You got to like the Facebook page. You have to like it, and then you have to click the 3 dots, and you have to click your follow settings. You have to click your follow settings on Facebook, and then you have to click favorites.
Yeah, do that stuff. It really helps.
If you don't click favorites, then the algorithm decides which of our posts you get to see.
Also,
and it's much less than the cat meme groups that you're in.
Jack B.E. Lucy said, I'd love to see Elliot Fried talk. I don't know who Elliot Fried is.
Find him. Blark Shard recommended somebody called Deviant Ollum.
Oh my God, great. Give us more ideas.
Yes.
We're looking for some folks to come on. The theme of the show is post-orthodoxy. So the idea is let's talk about some shit that's not in the public square for some reason. The people who've been disappeared or who have been stymied from ever entering into the soapbox in the community space.
Yeah.
If you have people that you want to hear, we've been reaching out to people and having really good luck.
Yeah, most people have said yes.
We've, when we reached out to the Ethical Skeptic, or we reached out to Fabio
Vigi, oof.
They just said, hell yeah, well, I'll talk to you guys.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we like our record so far. If you have somebody who maybe you don't know personally, or you do know personally, or that is out there doing things that are interesting, that you would like to see us talk to,
topics,
let us know.
I want to get some more into some of the deconstructionist stuff going on in the post-Christian community. There are a lot of people that grew up really religious and are kind of being like, this is harmful. What do we do about it? If you're on YouTube, hit the like button on the video, hit subscribe, and then hit the bell. Otherwise, you will also not know when we go live. I don't know how it works on Twitch. Just follow me on Twitch. I just try to follow everybody that tunes in.
Yeah, I like the Twitch layout. I like how they're doing their thing over there.
Twitch always has the best quality video, too.
Yeah, it's true, because they're a gamer.
They smush it some kind of way. I don't know.
So these are all us saying things to you, and we really appreciate you sticking around for the show.
And thanks for sticking around.
And thanks for saying stuff.
Pitch.
Yeah, thanks for sticking around and being in the communication thread the whole day. Did we get past 100 today? Did we get some award?
Weirdly, we didn't get the 100 comment award.
Wild.
I think it has something to do with like individual users. I don't know. Maybe I did too many comments.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse. When we first started doing this, one of our early videos, after we left the studio and we went to a movie, my phone kept going off, and we ended up having 10,000 people watch our video.
Because Facebook put it in the feed.
Because Facebook
live
put
videos.
it in the feed, because we were having the kind of comments that we're having today.
We were having people like you interacting with us from all over the world.
So suddenly we would be in the commons. We were in the commons where suddenly people from all over the world said, fucking hey, what's going on over here? Fuck you guys. Or hey, this is great. Suddenly it was like 10,000 people over the course of 2 hours. And then it stopped.
Yeah, it doesn't happen anymore.
So we would like to find the people who give a shit. We don't need to be in the commons if it's full of a bunch of jokers. I like jokers as much as, but I think there's some serious shit that needs to be talked about.
We're here to talk about some shit.
So yeah, pitch. It's not easy for me to do. I did it. $5 a month ain't much.
You guys,
make the effort, please.
Yeah, you guys not slowly logging off over the last 10 minutes has been very encouraging.
Very encouraging. Yes.
Like not having to watch that number go down and down and down. You're like, well, it's done
we're
for
out of
today.
here.
But let's fucking wrap it up. Let's wrap it up because this is good. This is some good shit. We love you guys. Let's get to 200 people. 200 people at $5 a month covers our ass.
Yeah.
And then long before we get to that point, I'm going to start cooking up the other shit we want to do. We want to take Post-Orthodoxy on the road. When we hear about something like the Capitol Hill Occupied protest or Oleg, who we interviewed in Ukraine, volunteered for us to come and stay in his apartment in Kiev, and he would take us around, in Poland.
In Poland.
And he would take us around the Ukraine while he does his runs taking supplies to people. If we had the money to do this as a job, we would buy plane tickets to Poland and then drive around Ukraine and interview people, and you would get to talk to them.
Post-Orthodoxy is a parallel institution.
Yes.
This is an institution. We serve a journalistic mission. We're not actually doing the deep dives all the time and sitting out somebody's door and taking the time and date. But what we are doing is a shit ton of media analysis to help understand how the information is coming, which is as important as understanding what the information is coming at you. Stuff that makes it to your eyes, there's an agenda to get it to your eyes. Our agenda to get it to your eyes is to find people who give a shit, so that we can get some feedback on the journey towards having a better time.
We should be able to interact globally with our neighbors. That's what the internet should be for, is we should be able to be direct democracy on the internet. We should be able to be directly talking with people on the ground who are experiencing shit instead of having to go through this hinge funnel. The polyamory community calls it a hinge. So like if you're dating me and then you're dating Susie, that's a hinge. But I'm not dating Susie. It's not a triad. It's a hinge on a door. So like right now, you don't get to talk to the people in Ukraine. You only hear about them through some funnels. And who are running those funnels? And what are those funnels' motivations?
Those are questions that you should ask. And we demonstrate us trying to figure that shit out every week.
Yep.
We're not telling you what's happening in the world. We're telling you how we're trying to figure out what's happening in the world, which I think is the more important issue. How do we be free of manipulation? Yeah. Well, how do you recognize your own bias? Oh, we out of here?
I have to pee.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're gonna have a show
with Mark French this weekend. Lots of them.
Stay tuned. Visiting our Outpost in the Borderlands. Post-Orthodoxy is a project of Sevier Studios. We host ongoing, interactive conversations centered around cognitive liberty, and you can join in by catching one of our live streams on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. You can also catch each conversation after the fact as a podcast by searching for Post-Orthodoxy wherever podcasts are found. If you take value from the work we are doing and the community we're building together, you can support the Outpost in the Borderlands for as little as $5 a month on our website, Better Time. That's betterti.me. Visit the Sevier Studios page and subscribe. You can also support The Outpost by following and connecting with us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and or Substack. Our Post-Orthodoxy theme music was composed by Frank Pascal, and a special thanks goes to our voice actors, Amelia, Colin, Zbo, Rosie, Gabo, Vicky, Mokai, and Tony.
Thanks for playing.
What's outside your reality bubble? I think I dribbled a bit that last one.